All right, and we are live. Let's wait for people to be here. Okay, let's see what we've got here. All right, we got some people in here. All right, so we are here for the fireside chat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get that started. Now we've got people here. All right, so what we want to do here, ladies and gentlemen, we want to we want to come to a consensus here. Oh man, Kevin, man, yeah, I've given away so much free stuff over the years, but anyway, it is, I appreciate y'all's, y'all's being willing to pay for, just a smaller session like this. But let's see if we can come to a consensus. Now we'll have at least a 90-minute review. If I've still got it in me, I'll do even more than that. Okay, so we're thinking 20th century. All right, so go ahead and let's kind of think about like what do we want to do in the 20th century. All right, so as far as that kind of stuff, okay. Now, as far as that, Connor, the XYZ affair. So, which this is the sort of thing, if I can get some, very specific questions, the objective here is, you're paying to be here. We've got a small group. Now, this thing sold out. So, I could have opened up more spots, but I decided, that's not why I did this. Okay. That's not really what I want to do. I don't want to open up more spots. I want this to be something that is that is good for y'all. So as far as that kind of stuff, let's go ahead and the XYZ affair. Now, of course, this is during that time where things are kind of tense with France, during the Adams administration. And basically, we're trying to go fix things. This during that quasi-war, Alien and Sedition Acts and all of that. And so our envoys get to France and they're trying to speak to the government. And one of the government officials, the three government officials, they call X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, we'll let you talk to the French government if you pay us a bribe. And so that got people in America really ticked off. But keep in mind your backdrop here, so the French government insulted the United States. And this is, of course, that time of the quasi-war. Okay. Now, okay. And if I answer one of your questions, kind of back down for a little bit and let some other people get their stuff in there. Okay. So as far as that kind of stuff, the Red Scares. Okay. And then I can move on to like the New Left and stuff. Okay. The Red Scares. Now, the easy thing to remember about the Red Scares is on one side, the first Red Scare after World War I. Okay, the first Red Scare after World War I. And what is associated with that is the Palmer raids. Okay, the Palmer raids, which, Keith Hughes is talking about that in our public hangout. The Palmer raids were basically raids against radical immigrants. And so, where basically like just, you have a radical ideology, they're going to raid you. Of course, they're not citizens. So it's like, do they have a right to be here if they have radical ideologies? That's something for people to decide on their own. So the Palmer raids, and that's what I do here, that you want to know when it happened, what it was, and kind of something to put together with that. Now, the second Red Scare in the 1950s after World War II, that is McCarthyism, okay? And that's where Joseph McCarthy is saying that, there are communists in our government, there are communists in the State Department, and all of that kind of stuff. And so as far as that's concerned, that you've got this going on. So McCarthyism is in the 1950s, of course, during the time of the Cold War, and that is the second Red Scare after World War II. So first Red Scare after World War I, 1920s, second Red Scare, which is World War II. Okay, so first and second World War, first and second Red Scare. Now, as far as the New Left and the New Right, the New Left is basically the beginning. Like this is where, this is like the more radical wing of the Democratic Party, where the Democratic Party, if you look like, before like, even Kennedy, I wouldn't call him like any kind of like, radical. It's like Kennedy was a bourgeois kind of, kind of centrist liberal. I mean, of course, Kennedy was like very big, a big anti-communist. Like you look at his anti-communist rhetoric, big time. You know, Kennedy would have been, you know, pro-life, for example. You know, so the Democratic Party around the time of the Vietnam War, you see the New Left, and they wanted to take the Democratic Party in another direction, kind of leftward, and you start to see, you know, some of this, you know, you see the Democratic nominees, you know, they're nominating not from their centrist wing, but from their liberal wing. Of course, the new right, you're talking about like Ronald Reagan, the conservative movement, and that sort of thing. All right, now, as far as that goes, let's see. Now we've got the Sherman and the Clayton Antitrust Act. Okay, so the Sherman Act was during the Gilded Age, and the Sherman Act was weak. It was supposed to be something that was weak, and you know the government didn't want like big antitrust legislation. They just needed to pass a law. And so the Sherman Act was written so the trust could get around it. Okay, it's like, you know, businesses a lot of times get around, you know, unfriendly legislation. And so, you know, what you see there with the Sherman Act is it's weak. And so it was more effectively used against labor unions than it was against actual trust. And so the Clayton Antitrust Act, now, of course, the Sherman Act was during the Gilded Age, so it wasn't like they were really wanting to go after the trust big time. Now, the Clayton Act was during Wilson's administration, during the Progressive era. And when they passed the Clayton Antitrust Act, they're really trying to go after these trusts, and that is a strong act. And then the Clayton Act, you know, the Clayton Act went, you know, again, like basically exempted labor unions. So labor unions are not subject to antitrust legislation. Now, as far as that goes, okay, thank you for actually working together. You know, that's a good thing too. Okay, so the different types of religion. Now, the first Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening. Now, of course, the Great Awakenings have to do with you know, emotional preaching, you know, more of a sort of emotional kind of thing here, rather than just you know, your just standard like elite dominated religion. So both of them had emotional preaching. Now, the first Great Awakening was more influenced by Calvinism. The second Great Awakening more influenced by Arminianism. You have a choice, you know. And so as far as that goes, the second Great Awakening is a causal factor for the antebellum reform movements that happen in the, you know, during the antebellum period, because, you know, it's like, look, you have a choice to be good, a choice to be evil. And so people are like, well, you know what, we've got evil in the world today, you know, slavery, we've got people drinking alcohol and beating their wives and that sort of thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm noticing I'm doing a lot of like contrasting and comparing, which is good. So the free soil movement, okay, the free soil movement. Now, the abolitionists come around in the 1830s, and the abolitionists are never really like mainstream before the Civil War. Okay, they're always seen as kind of radical. Now, the free soil movement comes around after the Mexican War. You know, it gains steam after the Mexican War. So, you know, you have the Mexican Cession. Now, there's the Wilmot Proviso, which is associated with the free soil movement, which is to stop the spread of slavery, stop the spread of slavery. So as long as slavery is not around me, okay? Yeah, TomRichey.net, learning delivered. All right. So as far as that kind of stuff goes, that free soil is like, look, I just don't want it around me. That if slavery's in the South, whatever, but I don't want it to spread anywhere. And this is something that's easier to mainstream because, you know, people in the North know that the economy is dependent on slavery. And so they don't want to get rid of it, but they're like, you know what? I kind of like the idea of it not spreading and that staying in the South. You know, I compare it in a video that I made of basically like, you know, I had a neighbor who didn't see it necessary to take his dogs like away from our apartment building, but he was just like letting his dogs do their business right by our apartment building. And I was just like, dude, like this can't happen anymore. Like your dogs need to go away from the building. Okay. So as far as that, that's, you know, that's, it's different there. Now, What are the difference between muckrakers and progressives? Muckrakers, now muckrakers are there during the progressive era. All right, during the progressive era, but they're not necessarily, well, muckrakers, it depends. I mean, some muckrakers like Upton Sinclair were outright socialists. Remember, the progressives were not socialists. The progressives are people who want to, they want more involvement for government. They want a managed marketplace, but they're not necessarily like full-on socialists. A lot of these people are upper middle class and that sort of thing. All right. Now, as far as that goes, Carter's, now the muckrakers, they're reporters. Okay. So what makes someone a muckraker is you're trying to expose corruption in the government or in big business or something like that. Okay. Now, what makes someone a progressive is just an outlook, a way of looking at things. Okay. So you could be a muckraker and a progressive. If you wanted to. Okay. So as far as that goes, now Carter's administration, Augustus Carter's administration. Now I would say that foreign policy, as I was saying in the public review, that the foreign policy is a humanitarian, a human rights foreign policy. And so you see the biggest expression of that in the Camp David Accords, that he's making peace between Egypt and Israel. Now, of course, the Iran hostage crisis got out of hand. Now, Carter was also dealing with what stagflation, basically like high inflation, high unemployment, low economic growth, and all of that kind of stuff. So Carter's dealing with like a lot of economic problems here at home. And so that is something that's important to note. In the economy, it's not like Carter just caused this stuff to happen. I mean, you had the OPEC embargo. So the OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So that's something that I think is important to note as well. And so now Plessy v. Ferguson. All right, Plessy v. Ferguson, we go to now by Frederick Scott. I'm guessing we're meaning, Dred Scott. But Plessy v. Ferguson, now, of course, you've got the 14th Amendment, which is passed during Radical Reconstruction. And Radical Reconstruction was, Radical Reconstruction is, basically like, hey, Africa, everybody born here is a citizen. That is, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And everybody's entitled to equal protection of laws. This equal protection clause is very important. Equal protection of laws. And so as far as that goes, this equal protection of laws, everybody has equal protection. And so in Louisiana, they decided, well, you know what, we're going to segregate rail cars. And so, there was a lawsuit that was basically saying, look, this is illegal. You can't segregate rail cars under the 14th Amendment because it entitles everyone to equal protection of laws. And that's where the Supreme Court, now the Supreme Court in general during the era of Jim Crow supported Jim Crow. Did not interfere. And so the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy that, hey, as long as there is a car available for colored passengers, and it is, it's of comparable quality. Now, of course, in practice, it wasn't necessarily of comparable quality, but, it's equal. So the thing is, if I have a pizza and you have a pizza, we both have a pizza. That's equal. So, the Supreme Court basically kind of permitted Jim Crow. You might have heard of the slaughterhouse cases. That's another one where the Supreme Court basically refused to intervene at the last of the, at the end of the 19th century when it came to Jim Crow. Okay, so as far as that goes, Regina, bimetallism, the populist movement, okay, that basically, the populists, these farmers felt like they were being squeezed because there wasn't enough money to go around, okay? There wasn't enough money to go around. And so as far as that goes, there's not enough money. And, so why don't you print more money, okay? Basically, if we could have more money backed by precious metals. Okay. So instead of just having the gold standard, we want to have bimetallism. We want to have money that's backed by gold and silver, which will increase the money supply, but it'll still be backed by something. And so as far as that is concerned, basically, if you don't have money, you kind of like the idea of more money being printed. But if you have money, it's like, well, wait, we're going to expand the money supply. That means my money will be worth less, or my money will be worthless. Okay. And so a lot of people are afraid of going off of the gold standard, because the gold standard has, has guaranteed everybody, enough, basically we've got sound money. We know what our money's worth. Our money is stable. And so the populists, they wanted, they wanted bimetallism. Now also the populists wanted, really like radical democracy. They wanted initiative and referendum and recall. They wanted direct election of senators, which of course they got in the form of the 17th Amendment. They wanted economic reforms, like they wanted the government to nationalize the railroads, to take over the railroads. And so the populists, in some ways, you might think of it as like a Jeffersonian movement because it's farmers. But on the other hand, you've also got, these, as far as these farmers are concerned, they're wanting government to take a very direct role in the management of the economy. Another thing about the populists is they wanted the secret ballot. They wanted the secret ballot. Okay, so as far as that, I've got a few there. Let me see what's going on. Here. Now, the insular cases. All right. So what's going on is the United States is expanding. As the United States expanding during this time of imperialism, then what we're seeing here is basically, does the Constitution follow the flag? Does the Constitution? Oh, this cursor don't grab me. I saw somebody say something about the Embargo Act. I was thinking about that embargo spelled backwards. This cursor don't grab me. Y'all ever seen that cartoon with the guy with the snapping turtle bites him in the butt? It's really funny. Anyway, as far as that is concerned, what was I even talking about? When I saw the embargo, that's like my reflexive action. All right. So as far as, seriously, what was I just talking about? Somebody help me. So yeah, I really so as far as that goes, talking about populism, I don't know. Okay. Somebody remind me. Yeah. All right. So as far as that, let me just go back here. Now, as far as the American, the insular cases. So does the Constitution follow the flag? And the insular cases said that, well, just because the U.S. controls a territory doesn't mean that people in that territory become citizens unless Congress makes an act there. And the insular cases are actually like still on the books in some way or another. All right. The American System by Henry Clay, Justin, I call this NIP. All right. NIP. So what we've got here now, I've got 56 watching. I'm going to tell y'all now, technically you can give this link to your friends, but if you give this link to your friends, you dilute it. You get more people in here asking more questions. Now, so you might, if you have your friend in here just watching or something, but you can always show them the archive. I'm just warning y'all, like, since y'all paid for this, if people are sending this link out to people, that means that more people are going to be in here and people are going to be asking questions that didn't pay to come in here and ask questions. So just so y'all understand that this is not in y'all's self-interest to share the link with people, that would be something that you want to take into account. And if you are sharing the link, make sure that person knows they probably shouldn't be asking questions when people, when people paid to come in here. So, as far as Henry Clay's American System, NIP, all right, National Bank, Internal Improvements, Protective Tariff. Now, what he's doing here is he is reviving after the War of 1812, even though the Federalist Party ceased to exist. The Federalist platform is revived, like the Federalist banner is dropped and Henry Clay picks up that banner. Now, Henry Clay was a war hawk. Henry Clay was somebody who was like clamoring for war. And then the War of 1812 kind of showed us, we're just not quite as big as we thought we were. And, that's really kind of a reality check. And so Henry Clay after that is thinking, okay, when you think about like why the War of 1812 started, it was because we weren't able to, as far as that thing, let's see. Okay. Yes, that's fine. Okay. Okay, so as far as that's concerned, for some reason, Priyanka can't get into the live chat. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Henry Clay's American System, it's like, basically before the War of 1812, we were still on the Jeffersonian economic model. And the Jeffersonian economic model is based on trade with Europe. It's like we make raw materials, Europe makes finished goods. We trade because remember, Jefferson said we don't want all those filthy, dirty cities. You know, I went to New York City a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh my goodness, like where are the trees and where are the farms and where are the cows, you know? And then I went to Miami last weekend. It was just like, wow, because that's a more spread out city and you got all kinds of like trees and stuff. And, you know, it felt less intimidating. But the thing is that Jefferson was like, I don't want any cities. Like, this is just not something that, this is just not something that interests me at all. And so Jefferson, was like, we want to trade with Europe, but we don't want to manufacture. Remember, Jefferson wrote it would be good if we had zero manufacturing. And so as far as that's concerned, Henry Clay's like, look, we can't continue this Jeffersonian economic model because the British basically stopped us from trading. So what we need is a country that doesn't need Europe, okay? That basically Henry Clay sees the American system as a way to get the United States away from being influenced by Europe. And so, national bank, internal improvements, protective tariff. Now, remember, the South's pretty much left out of this, okay? That the South, which was running a trading economy, is like, look, we're having to, when these high tariffs are put up, like the tariff of 1828, that this is, this is not good for us because the South was responsible for most of the foreign trade. So the South ends up paying, the lion's share of these taxes. But remember the American system. Now, of course, the nullification crisis is really a big, to-do over the American system and whether a protective tariff is even constitutional, which the South Carolinians claim it's not. And if you read the Constitution where it talks about taxation, it can be done to pay the debts of the United States, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare. It doesn't say that it can be used to basically help build up business and manufacturing in the United States, which is what Henry Clay wanted to do. He wanted to develop the West. He wanted to build northern industry, and he wanted the North to basically trade with the South, that the South, grows these crops and then trades with the North, and then they get manufactured there. The South, not so big on it, not so big on that idea. All right. And so as far as that, doing a couple problems with an old AP and walking you through it. Okay. Now let's see, as far as that goes, what do you mean by that? Because I did do a multiple choice session already. So I'm not so much into like test strategy, but we can do a little bit of that if there's a question, but as long as there are content oriented questions, I'm going to give those priority. All right. So as far as, the New Deal, okay, to say how you got to that point. So you're asking about the Spanish-American War, talk about foreign policy leading up to it. And you could see the thing about the Spanish-American War is the Spanish-American War represents a turning point in U.S. foreign policy. That before the Spanish-American War, before the Spanish-American War, what you're dealing with is basically the Washingtonian, Jeffersonian, isolationist, non-interventionist, no ally, no permanent alliances kind of foreign policy. And so as far as that goes, that's what's going on before the Spanish-American War. Now, 1898, where you've got the Spanish-American War, you've also got the annexation of Hawaii. This is where the United States is going to, going to basically become an imperial power. And then after that, you've got the United States with the big stick, the open door policy in China. So you'd be using this kind of as a turning point. And now, as far as this, Bailey, I agree with you on the SAQs that A, B, and C makes it easier on readers. Now, as long as you're actually answering A, B, and C. Now, technically, as long as you answer all the parts, the readers are trained. If it's all one thing, the readers are trained to look at all one thing. But I think it's better for you to answer each question independently, because that way you are in a situation where you are, when you're answering each question independently, you're making sure you answer the question, and I think that if you don't do A, B, and C, and I like to tell people to skip a line, just make sure that you are differentiating those things. And when you're answering A, you're answering A. Okay. So that is, that I think is very important. Okay, and as far as that goes, like we're saying that we're looking at, we're looking at basically the more specific it is, the better. So as far as the scope, oh Murray, I know you from like social media. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. And so Murray, the Scopes trial. Okay, now what's important to note is in the 1920s, you've really got a couple things going on here, like. Warren G. Harding said that we're going to have a return to normalcy. There's been all this progressivism and imperialism and war. And Warren G. Harding is like, look, vote for me if you want to a return to normalcy and an America first foreign policy. And it ends up that really there are a couple currents here, because there is a side of America that is more cosmopolitan, more urban, more educated, and more likely to latch on to like other explanations of creation besides what's in the Bible. There's a lot of trends toward agnosticism and stuff like that. Now, on the other side, you've got people who are very religious. And so that's what's coming out. Now, actually, I've got a copy. I just found a copy on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. I've got a copy of the Fundamentals. Okay. Fundamentalism. Is a form of Christianity that basically it's a very conservative interpretation of Christianity. And so fundamentalism says basically like, look, the Bible says what it says. If you don't, it's a very Bible centric kind of Christianity. And so, it's one of those things that, it's very critical of modern philosophy and modern schools of biblical interpretation. And, basically, and also, fundamentalism says that Catholicism's not Christianity, that Mormonism's not Christianity. It's a very limiting definition of Christianity. And it's basically when there's, the story of creation in the Bible, that the Bible says God created Adam and Eve. And there you go. End of story. What more do we need? Whereas there's another current in society that is saying that, look, we've got other scientific theories and stuff like that that are saying otherwise. And so the Scopes trial is really like, it's just very like conservative, rural America. This is the state of Tennessee. And, this is a very conservative state, and they passed a state law saying that you couldn't do anything. You couldn't teach any account of creation other than what is in the Bible. And so then, what happened was, this guy Scopes, who was a young substitute teacher, the community leaders, they said they wanted to host the trial. So they basically talked him into teaching a lesson on evolution, and he broke the law. And so they put him on trial, and William Jennings Bryan shows up. Remember Cross of Gold speech? William Jennings Bryan was very religious. And so, there you go. As far as that goes, William Jennings Bryan, very, very religious guy, and, ended up just showing up. And then Clarence Darrow from the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, shows up to defend Scopes. Scopes was found guilty, but then later on, the conviction was overturned. All right. Can I go over some notable labor unions? Okay. Now, as far as that goes, let's see. Do I barely understand what a political machine? Okay. So now the Pendleton Civil Service. Let me go over a few things here. Wait. Okay. It keeps putting me back to somewhere else. Okay. The Pendleton Civil Service Act. Okay. Now, as far as the Pendleton, the conclusion is the best place for synthesis, because that's where your reader is expecting to see it. There's nothing saying where synthesis has to go, but your reader is expecting to see it at the end. So putting your system, your synthesis at the end is good practice. Now, the Pendleton Civil Service Act. Okay, now political machines, a political machine, let me kind of tie all this together. That a political machine is a political organization that's typically aimed at consolidating immigrant votes. So if I come over from Ireland or Italy, then I come over and, they help me. Like other Irish people greet me at the boat, and they're like, okay, we're going to find you a place to stay. We're going to find you a job. We're going to get you involved in this community here. Now, here's the catch. We want you to vote. Like we're going to come back for your vote later. And so basically these immigrant groups, were organized into, basically voting blocks, because the local political machine guy was the person helping these immigrants, get on their feet initially. So they started to wield, political power. So the political machines, these were people who, like, if you had their support, you also had support of the urban immigrant population. So one of the most important political machines, was Tammany Hall, which was a Democratic political machine in New York City, and run by Boss Tweed. Now the thing is, if you think about it, when somebody got elected to office, like when somebody got elected president, if you are a Democrat, you may owe Tammany Hall something. So you make appointments, based on that. And so, you make these political appointees. Now, Jackson, you go back to the spoils system with Andrew Jackson, where basically he fired like all John Quincy Adams people, because at that time, the president could fire any employee, like down to the local postmaster. The president could fire anybody that he wanted to, and hire and fire anyone. Now, what the Pendleton Civil Service Act did is it classified certain jobs, like a lot of federal jobs, it made them into career jobs. So it's like when President Trump came in, he couldn't fire a postmaster. He couldn't fire, now he could fire like the acting attorney general. There are some people at the top who are political appointees that the president can hire and fire. But most of like the regular staff people, like I've got a buddy who majored in some kind of computer engineering, and he's got like one of those jobs where like he tells you what he does and you're like, that's baloney, except you're not thinking baloney. All right. And, you're thinking like, whatever. And, that's probably not your real job. Okay. Now, the thing is, he's a member of the civil service. He's a bureaucrat. He's somebody who, he could be listening to whatever right now. Who knows? Okay. But I don't know exactly what he does, but it's just like, wait, okay, you had this degree and now you work here, and oh, I can't get in touch with you during the day. Oh, I wonder why, that sort of thing. So you've got jobs like this that like the president can't just go in and say this person doesn't have their job. And it creates a merit-based system rather than a politics-based hiring system. Okay. Now, as far as the labor unions, now the Knights of Labor would have been an early labor union. Now, of course, their reputation was tarnished by the Haymarket affair, because the Knights of Labor were instrumental in, putting together the protests that led to that cop being killed. And so as far as that, now the labor movement, the biggest like stumbling block is that a lot of Americans saw the labor movement as being run by communists, socialists, anarchists, those people who were involved in Haymarket, the people who hanged after that, they were foreign anarchists. All right. So basically you got foreigners, communists, socialists, anarchists. And so basically there's this concept, there's this idea that labor unions are somehow un-American. All right. And so, so a big turning point here. Now you got people like Eugene Debs, the perennial presidential candidate. He was a socialist. Okay. He was a socialist labor leader. And he was like, look, we want to seize the means of production. The capitalist system is evil. Now, this is where a guy named Samuel Gompers comes in. Okay. Samuel Gompers, who was, Samuel Gompers, who was the, the head of the American Federation of Labor. Now note here, the American Federation of Labor, that branding there is that this is American. This is not anti-capitalist. This is not anything. Basically, Samuel Gompers is like, I figured out what to do. Make a network of unions that are all skilled white guys. Okay. Because the thing is, like, my students that work at Chick-fil-A, somebody could learn how to do their job in a day or two. Now, if you think about teachers, for example, if your teachers were to go on strike, it's like, it's hard to find like replacements, because, to be a teacher, you go to school for like 4 years, and then also if you think about the times you've had a student teacher, I've had a few great student teachers, but most of the time student teachers aren't that great. Teaching is one of those things that you learn how to do better as you get experience. And so, one of those things, like, you can't really just replace teachers. So unionizing teachers You can do that effectively. So if you think about people who had like, some skills, like somebody who is a plumber or something like that, well, you can make a plumbers union or something like that, because that is, that is a skilled job. So let's get skilled white men, and let's make it clear that we don't have a problem with American capitalism. We just want more money, less hours, better working conditions, but we don't have a problem with, we can come to an accommodation. This is called bread and butter unionism. Basically, I'm just unionizing for the money. I'm in this for the money, just like you are, because I'm an American and you're an American. And so it's a type of unionism that the American Federation of Labor, under the leadership of Samuel Gompers, created a labor union that could go into the mainstream, that could challenge this whole idea that labor unions were a bunch of foreigners, communists, anarchists, and socialists that had contributed to, this very bad reputation that labor unions had. So as far as that goes, I think that would be a good way to look at this. All right. Now, the thing is, the decline of support to the Knights of Labor, to the Red Scare. Are you thinking about like some synthesis? And remember, a lot of times with synthesis, okay, what I think is important with synthesis. Thanks for slowing down on the chat a little bit. I hope that as I'm answering people's questions, I can because I want to make sure I get to everybody. We've got another hour left, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to all that. So as far as that goes, let's see, the compromises. Okay. So now, as far as synthesis, remember, synthesis is not making like a small point. Synthesis is carrying your entire thesis. And so make sure that when you do synthesis, now you include a detail when you do synthesis, but make sure that you are you know what, I'm gonna give you all a little something here. Okay. Let me just this is part of my 8-month writing clinic, but we're all friends here, right? Y'all go ahead and answer me. Like, let me just make sure that I understand this right. Are we all friends here? Are we all friends here? All right. That's important. That's an important question. All right. So as far as that goes, okay. Let me see. Okay, and let me see what we got there. Okay, yes, we're besties. Okay, so Murray, we're besties. What I'm doing here, I have been charging for this. Okay, this is something I charge for, and people have been paying for. It's an 8-month writing clinic. I just sent y'all a link. All right. 8-month writing clinic, ladies and gentlemen. That is something that I've been selling all year, but I'm going to refer your writing questions to that page, because what I do there is I basically do like I want y'all to get some value from this. Okay. Hey, don't call what I do crash course. Okay. That's not good branding. Like, that's a competitor. So find some other thing to call it. You see what I mean? Like, don't call what I do crash course. But the thing is, the 8-month writing clinic, you're going to see, like, you've got questions about synthesis. You got questions about how to write a thesis, how to set up a DBQ. I've got videos on all that where I'm basically running through it. So if there's some question you have about writing, just go ahead and go there. Bailey, I owe you my life too, because you gave me $10. Gosh, that would be kind of funny if that were true. Huh? But anyway, I just want to make sure that y'all are getting everything you need. So let's focus on content. Okay. So as far as that goes, there you go. So I want y'all to be prepared. Y'all are my friends. Okay. We are having a fireside chat. I'm talking directly to you. I'm not doing shout outs. I'm not performing for people. We're chatting. And the link, I put the link up already. I'm going to put the link there again. Okay. So I'll put that in the chat again. Tom Richey. So it's on tomrichy.net. And so that link, keep that yourselves. But anyway, that's something I'm going to be doing that again next year. But it's over now. So y'all go ahead. Any writing questions, I'm going to refer you to the clinic, which I just shared with you for free. All right. So as far as that kind of thing, that's true. That's true. And I'm just adding value to what y'all have done. And yeah, please make sure that y'all recommend, what I'm doing. Now the thing is, Truman and MacArthur. Okay. Yeah, I'll do compromises. Okay. Now everybody. Okay. Here's the thing. Kayla, I'm going to get to compromises before we're done. I'll talk about imperialism a little bit, okay? But I want to make sure, okay, quit spamming, okay? I want you to stop spamming, all right? It's going to be, yes, yes, thank you, but it's going to be easy. It's going to be easier if you just ask for what you want once. The whole reason for doing this fireside chat is so that we can go through this calmly, okay? So everyone calm down. No, but you're also stressing yourself out, Kayla, because you're putting the same thing over and over again. And so let's just, okay, compromises, the new deal. All right, the new deal. Okay, I'm going to make myself a list here. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say compromises. Okay, the new deal. All right, let's make a few more. So we can just kind of direct this, because I don't want y'all, don't spam the chat like this is a live hangout. You see what I'm saying? So what I want you to do is, like, let's make this something like, you know, everybody's going to get a turn here. All right. So as far as that goes, Vietnam and Korea. Okay, that really, we talked about Vietnam and Korea during the public hangout, but I'll put that in as kind of low priority. Now, we didn't spend a lot of time on the Gilded Age. You know, so, you know, but in the public hangout, we did address the Vietnam War and the Korean War. You want to know a little bit about the Gilded Age, so I can do a little review on the Gilded Age, because that was not hit during the thing. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. We discussed Reaganomics. I think we talked about the Great Depression and stuff like that as well. You know, Vietnam ended up okay. So as far as that, the Yalta Conference. Now, the Yalta Conference was, you know, the Yalta Conference is basically where they got together and got into, you know, I think I've already addressed some imperial. Zachary, don't do that to your computer. All right. You know, so as far as that, okay, so causes of war, so a bit about maybe World War I, okay, and specifically U.S. involvement. Okay, so World War I, U.S. involvement. Okay, so anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and remember, we're going to try to get everybody a turn, and I may even be here a little longer than I said I'd be here. Okay, so we're going to see what we can do, but I just want to make sure there's no reason to spam right now. Okay, we'll do that now. Eisenhower's foreign policy, Murray, massive retaliation. Now, also, I've got this on my APUSH review page. I've got some stuff there. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ignore the chat a little bit, and I'm going to, but yeah, massive retaliation. What you want to look for, Murray, on that. Okay, the American Expeditionary Force, all that. So internationalism. Now, the thing is, there are a few things here. Internationalism is Wilsonian, whereas, like, when you look at like TR's foreign policy, it's about American interest. So the thing is, and this is where, if you want to synthesize, okay, now, you know, this gets people anytime you're bringing up current politics, whatever. But you know, President Trump, you know, was, when he was running, he was very, like, critical of, like, you know, President Obama has had a more you know, had a more internationalist foreign policy. And that's where Donald Trump kept saying, America first, America first, America first, which, if you synthesize that, this was very similar. It was very similar to, like, Wilson's foreign policy, which was internationalist. And really, it didn't put American interest first necessarily. And that's the thing, that Wilson saw, like, the United States as a member of the global community. And, you know, that's the thing. So he saw the United States as members of more of a global community, whereas, you know, Teddy Roosevelt saw, you know, the United States like, you know, hey, we're a world power. So there was the internationalist foreign policy, there was the imperialist foreign policy, and then there was the isolationist foreign policy. And when you look at the Versailles Treaty debate, that a lot of the people who were you know, who were on the, you know, the irreconcilables, like, we don't want the treaty at all, those people tended to be from the isolationist wing. Whereas Henry Cabot Lodge and his faction of Republicans, who were like, okay, somebody's running around upstairs. Henry Cabot Lodge and his faction, that were the reservationists, that were okay with the treaty, but we want to make sure that the treaty is, you know, we want the treaty to be, amended. We want to have some reservations. We want to make sure we don't get involved in a war and that this suits our interest. And so that is more of like the imperialistic foreign policy, that we want to be engaged with the world, but we want to look out for American interests, you see? And so as far as that is concerned, that's what we're getting there. All right. And so now one thing, Truman versus MacArthur, I've seen that come up enough times. But basically, Truman was trying to enact the policy of containment. That basically, when North Korea invaded South Korea, Truman's goal was to contain it. That basically get back to the 38th parallel and say, look, okay, South Korea is protected. Now, Douglas MacArthur, we're in the, we're in a closed chat here. We're in a fireside chat. I'm talking to you like my friends. So Douglas MacArthur was a consummate badass. All right. I mean, this guy, this is the guy that, during the bonus army, when Herbert Hoover is like, just get these people out of town, okay, get them away from the federal buildings and all of that kind of stuff. And, Douglas MacArthur not only runs them out of town, but tear gases them, and then he burns their camp. And it's just like, you see what happens, Larry? I mean, it's just like Douglas MacArthur just does everything, just completely, over the top. Douglas MacArthur, a very extra kind of guy. So Douglas MacArthur said during the Korean War, he said, look, there's no substitute for victory. What it was that, see, the president is the commander in chief. And Douglas MacArthur had this disagreement with Truman because he was basically, it's the president's job to say what the objective is. And so that's the conflict with MacArthur and Truman, is that, what is the objective? And MacArthur's objective was to roll back communism. Okay. And to go into, into North Korea and, just annihilate it. And he said, if we need to use nuclear weapons, we'll use nuclear weapons, whatever it is that we have to do. That is what we're going to do. So, and he publicly disagreed with Truman. That's another thing, that he publicly disagreed with Truman, which is, part of the issue with that. And Truman finally fired MacArthur, but, not before MacArthur brilliantly executed the Incheon landing, which is one of the greatest military maneuvers. I'm hoping to do some military videos over the summer, because Douglas MacArthur, what a guy. And so, so as far as that's really the conflict here, that Truman was, that Truman was, practicing containment, and MacArthur's kind of previewing Ronald Reagan with the, with the rollback. Okay. So with that, we've got that. So yeah. So, I need to send an email real quick. Okay. So, gosh, I got the rain outside. I want to go to sleep, but you know what? I'm working for y'all right now. Somebody just bought one of my 8-month writing clinics that I gave to y'all for free. And the thing is, if I don't get that sent out, then I'm going to get an email where is this? So I'm trying to head that off at the pass. All right. So as far as that goes, we got that. But yeah, take a look at that 8-month writing clinic if you're on the West Coast. Okay. Now let me get to Priyanka's question, because Priyanka is not able to wow, Priyanka, we're going to need to kind of get this, we got to bring this in a little bit, okay? Because I've only got about 45 minutes or so. Now, as far as this goes, Hamilton's financial plan, economic policies. Now, the thing is, where are those? If I started talking about that, there are all those Hamilton musical people that probably know all this stuff. But remember that, I've got a video. I'm going to refer you to a video on Jefferson and Hamilton. Okay, so I've got a video on Jefferson and Hamilton, and basically the main differences between them. Hamilton is trying to build up a centralized federal government to, create a vibrant financial sector. Whereas Jefferson wants a federal government that is going to respect the rights of the states and for the most part, just stay out of the way. All right. And so as far as that goes, the 1950s women's movement, other civil rights movements. Now, the thing is, during World War II, you've got Rosie the Riveter. It's like women are working in the munitions factories. And So basically, like women, after World War II, they go home and they get back to, in the 1950s, this is a time of conformity, and white America moves out to suburbia, and the woman is, now expected to be in the home doing her thing, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, taking her kids to scouts. And it's like this whole kind of cult of domesticity. And a woman named Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique in the 1960s. And, she wrote that, like, there must be something more than this. As a woman, she just felt like this wasn't, this wasn't, this wasn't a fulfilling life. And so she was writing that, like, there's got to be something else out there, other than this. And so basically this starts the women's movement. Betty Friedan was one of the founders of the National Organization for Women. So Betty Friedan, National Organization for Women, and the Feminine Mystique, put all that in a box together. And so women, what they want here is they want to be able to work. They want respect in the workplace. They want access not just to work, like secretarial work, but to the professions, to like positions of authority, which these weren't really available to women. They wanted protections from sexual harassment and stuff like that. Of course, you get into, Griswold versus Connecticut and Roe v. Wade with access to birth control and, abortion and stuff like that. Now, another thing to note here, though, is the Equal Rights Amendment was gaining a lot of steam in the 1970s. And what happened here is that was stalled. That ended up, it was on its way to being ratified, and it was stalled by a group of conservative women led by a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. Phyllis Schlafly, who should be in your textbook. She was the leader of the Eagle Forum. And that's something that, like, a lot of times we're so focused on like the women's movement, you forget, like, conservative women are a very powerful, political force. That's one of the things that, one of the stories of the 2016 election, people were like, why are all these women voting for Donald Trump? He's just awful, says all these awful things about women, but it's like, there are a lot of conservative women. And so the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, was actually defeated by a group of conservative women. And so, if we're comparing the Spanish-American War and the Mexican-American War, I would say that in both of those cases, the United States had interest in territory and all of that kind of stuff. So, the United States had interest in territory. Of course, the Mexican-American War is kind of the realization of manifest destiny, expanding to the Pacific, whereas the Spanish-American War is a realization of, like, America becoming an imperial power. So both of those things kind of help America to, realize something when it comes to expansion. So that would be a good comparison there. Okay, so Priyanka, hopefully I hit some of the stuff there since you've been having trouble in the chat. And let me go to some of these things that, that we're looking at here. All right, so as far today, let's see. All right, let me just make sure we've got everything. I've just got all kinds of like emails coming in. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything that is, let's see, did not get a verification email. Okay. So let me make sure there was something. Okay, let me see. I don't know if Alexa got in here or not. Let me see. Alexa, are you here? Are you here, Alexa? Tell me if you're actually here or not. Is Alexa actually in here? She sent me an email. So Alexa, are you here? Let's see. Okay, so as far as that goes, now of course, is the Federal Reserve a good thing? The thing is, it's much more like, what does the Federal Reserve do? That is something that I think is important. Now, the Federal Reserve governs monetary policy. Now, there are some people who don't like the Federal Reserve at all. Okay, Amazon's Alexa, haha. Now, who don't like the Federal Reserve at all. But the Federal Reserve regulates monetary policy, okay? Monetary policy. And monetary policy has two facets, okay? Monetary policy has, first of all, you've got the Yeah, fiscal policies, taxes, and spending. And monetary policy is interest rates and the money supply. So the Federal Reserve basically regulates the interest rates. Now, if you're a free market person, you might be of the sort of person who's like, you know what, the market should regulate interest. Now, of course, remember that the progressives weren't so much for the market regulating interest rates or anything like that. Progressives believe that the market was insufficient to do things. Okay, the market was insufficient to run things. But as far as that goes, that's progressive. It depends on whether you're a conservative or progressive or a libertarian or something like that. But remember, the Federal Reserve was created to regulate interest rates and the money supply, and basically to keep those things stable. Now, as far as the Gilded Age, okay, a few things about the Gilded Age. Now, of course, you've got the rise of industry, that the United States before the Civil War had been a largely agricultural country. Now, you've got the spread of some, railroads and stuff like that, but railroads really don't reach their full maturity until like after the Civil War. And, you see the Bessemer process with steel and all of that kind of stuff. So Rockefeller, Carnegie, these captains of industry. Now, a few things here that the government is seen as dominated. If you've never seen that cartoon, The Bosses of the Senate. Okay, now the Bosses of the Senate. Let me screen share with y'all real quick. Okay, the Bosses of the Senate. Let me see here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this cartoon up here. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. The Bosses of the Senate. So basically the view here is that the government is controlled by these, by these big trusts. Okay. So you see all of these trusts here keeping an eye on the government. And then the people's entrance is up here. The people's entrance is closed, whereas the monopolist interest is, entrance is there. And this is a Senate of the monopolist, by the monopolist, for the monopolists. And so, this idea that business is controlling the government. Now, there's kind of a myth, a misunderstanding that this was a laissez-faire kind of period. And it really wasn't a laissez-faire kind of period. During the Gilded Age, the government was really very firmly on the side of big business. Like, when you look at the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, the government is basically, the government is giving, giving subsidies to private corporations. So corporations are getting a lot of help from the government, and then they're able to like sell this land that they get from the government. So all kinds of relationships between the government and business. Now, of course, you've got, a lot of corruption in government during that time. That's one of the reasons for the passage of the Civil Service Act. The Panic of 1893. That starts a depression, which is the second biggest depression in the history of the United States, is brought on by the Panic of 1893. And that's the backdrop of the Pullman strike. So the Pullman strike, that is when, when this Panic of 1893 hits, then, the Pullman Rail Car Company, what they start doing here is they, basically the Pullman Rail Car Company has them living in a company town, and they cut wages, but they keep rent the same. And so there's a strike because they're saying like, look, if you're cutting wages, you should also cut the rent. And, it's kind of like that guy. I don't know if you've seen that Jimmy McMillan guy, like on YouTube and stuff. He ran for governor in New York, and he's like, the rent is too damn high. And so that's always what I think about when I am, when I'm thinking about the Pullman strike, because they're complaining about the rent. But the thing is, remember, during the Gilded Age, the federal government is always intervening against labor unions. So when they can use the Sherman Act to prosecute labor unions, your labor union's getting too big, so we're going to prosecute that labor union. Great. When the Great Railroad strike and the Pullman strike, they're like, look, interstate commerce clause, federal government's putting this down. All right. So that's what you get from that. And then, now as far as labor, remember Teddy Roosevelt gets in, and Teddy Roosevelt proposes a square deal. Teddy Roosevelt's like, the government really shouldn't pick a side. When you have the anthracite coal strike, Teddy Roosevelt ends up mediating that strike and inviting everyone to the, invites everyone to the White House. And so the business leaders, the business leaders are like, what's going, the business leaders are like, hey, why did you invite the laborers to the White House? That's ridiculous. And Teddy Roosevelt's like, you know what? If you don't show up out of protest, then I'm just going to talk to the laborers and we'll work that out. So Teddy Roosevelt was like, look, the government's job is to mediate, not to take the side of one side or the other. And of course, that ticked off his campaign contributors, but he's the president. Now, then you get into Woodrow Wilson's New Freedom and the Clayton Antitrust Act, and you start to see that like the government is actually doing things to help labor unions, such as exempting labor unions from the Clayton Antitrust Act. And then labor unions start becoming involved with the Democratic Party from then. Now, as far as that goes, another period where you're starting to see like, a lot of pro-union stuff is during the New Deal. During FDR's New Deal, you see a great deal of pro-labor union propaganda. Not propaganda, legislation. The Wagner Act, which created the National Labor Relations Board, which is still a permanent board to oversee disputes having to do with labor and capital and all of that kind of stuff. Okay. So the New Deal. Now you might want to look up the Taft-Hartley Act. Okay. Taft-Hartley Act, which is after World War II, when Republicans briefly got control of Congress. And there were a lot of strikes after World War II. And so public opinion was kind of turning against labor unions. And what the Taft-Hartley Act did is it allowed states to become exempt from certain provisions of the National Labor Relations Act, the Wagner Act. And so it basically updated the Wagner Act, and it wasn't so much basically states could become right to work states, and a lot of southern states opted to do this, and they attracted a lot of investment, because of this. Okay. So as far as that goes, we've got that. All right. So, let's see. So we've talked about the Gilded Age bit. Now, another thing about the Gilded Age is social Darwinism. Now, social Darwinism is basically, it emphasizes a free market economy, emphasizes an economy that, and basically for reasons that are beneficial. It's like, basically, look, the government shouldn't intervene to protect the little guy, not because we don't care about the little guy, but because the big guy is big because he's outcompeted other people. So the thing is, Rockefeller has a great company, an efficient company. Like, what a lot of people don't know about John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil is his oil was not only better than other people's oil, it was cheaper. And so Rockefeller was where he was. Now, Ida Tarbell can say whatever she wants, but Rockefeller had a very, very efficient operation. And notice when we're talking about strikes, you don't hear about a strike at the Standard Oil Company because Rockefeller actually paid his employees like above the going rate. So you never hear like, oh, there's a Standard Oil strike because they just didn't happen. And so Rockefeller, although you can say this and that about Rockefeller, it's like, look, I mean, he's actually, doing a lot of things right. And so if you take money from him, if you take money from this efficient enterpriser and you give it to this vagrant, the vagrant's not going to invest the money well. And so it's basically what you're going to do is the government is going to hurt society by trying to intervene and redistribute wealth because, the economy, if it's left alone, will naturally select the best people. Now, as far as the New Deal, we got into some of that alphabet soup stuff during the public hangout. But let me talk about some compromises. Okay, so when we're thinking about this, let's think about like compromises in U.S. history. All right, now what I'm going to do here, I think I'm going to actually share my screen a little bit because I might go ahead and just kind of make a little something here. Let me just take a quick look at the chat here. Okay, awesome. So you got there now horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal integration is your supply chain. Okay, so this is mainly what Carnegie's doing. Carnegie's trying to control his entire supply chain, whereas Rockefeller is trying to buy up as many oil refineries as he can. Horizontal integration, basically buying businesses that are doing the same thing. So Rockefeller ended up at one point controlling like 93%, like not a complete monopoly, but controlling 93% of, the oil industry, the oil refineries. Now, remember, trust. Now, what a trust is basically an association of businesses, okay? An association of businesses that are working together. They're not all owned by the same person, but they're put under like a shared board. Okay, so as far as this goes, the Whigs and the Mexican-American War. Okay, so we got Geraldine there, who can't get into the chat. Now the Whigs. Okay, now the second two-party system. All right, the second two-party system was the Whigs, led by Henry Clay, the Democrats, led by Andrew Jackson, and then his successors. And so as far as that goes, the Whig Party was more of an elitist party. Okay, Jackson's party was more democratic. The Whigs tended to have their power base in the Northeast and had a bit of a foothold on the West as well with Henry Clay. Now, what the Whigs were never really able to do permanently, unless they nominated a war hero, they could get elected. The only two Whig presidents elected were war heroes, William Henry Harrison and Zachary Taylor. And so the Whig Party, okay, as far as the Whig Party, they never really could get like a coalition that was going to dominate. The Democrats were largely dominant during this time because the Whigs could never quite work out this whole alliance between the Northeast and the West, because the West, also liked Jackson and his policies. The Democrats were more into states' rights. The Whigs were more into having a stronger, central government and stuff like that. The Whigs supported Henry Clay's American system. Now, whereas the Democrats did not. The Whigs more likely to support moral reform. The Democrats not so much. Now, the Mexican-American War, what you've got here is, Texas, basically. That Texas got their independence from Mexico in the 1830s, and they petitioned to get into the Union. And so they're trying to get into the Union, and the United States like, you know what? No, thank you. We don't want drama. All right. We are looking not to have drama. And so they didn't want basically to have the drama of bringing another slave state in. It's like Texas, a really big slave state that could possibly be subdivided into other slave states. And so they didn't want like a domestic slavery controversy. And also they didn't want war with Mexico, because here's the thing. Texas said that their border was at the Rio Grande River, or Rio Grande, or whatever we want to call it. Now, but Mexico said, no, your border is not over here at the Rio Grande. Your border is way back here. And so if you take in Texas, you inherit a border dispute, which is exactly what we did. And so we basically sent Zachary Taylor and his, and his bunch over to the Rio Grande to basically assert the United States claim there. And so as far as that's going, the Max, I just saw that "you're my father" comment just randomly. All right. So as far as that goes, we're looking at that. And then, of course, that starts the Mexican War when there's some shooting over there between Zachary Taylor's troops and some Mexican troops. And the end of the Mexican War is, of course, the Mexican Cession, which brings you into that process where they're going into the Compromise of 1850 and all of that. Okay, so let's see. So we've got that. Now let me talk about some compromises. Okay, let me go into this and talk about some compromises. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen a little bit here. All right. So let's go over this, and we're going to share here. And so I'm going to make this a little bigger so y'all can see it. All right. So as far as compromises in U.S. history. Okay, so in U.S. history. Major compromises in U.S. history. So with that, let's see. All right. So first of all, I would say I would go to the Constitutional Convention. You've got those. Now you've got a couple compromises at the Constitutional Convention. You've got the, the so-called Great Compromise. Okay, which allows, the, the Senate and the House. Okay, so basically created the Senate and the House, because remember you had the Virginia plan, which was like the Virginians wanted to have, both houses determined by population, and the New Jersey plan that's like, you know what, we like one vote per state, and so that created the Senate and the House and allowed the Constitution to move forward. So the Senate and the House you know, and a, you know, compromising between the small and large states. Okay. Now, as far as that goes, then we've got the, you know, the 3/5 compromise. Okay. So the 3/5 compromise. Okay. The 3/5 compromise, which, you know, the 3/5 compromise basically solved the whole, you know, how are we going to count slaves? Okay. So how are slaves going to be counted for representation? You know, so that was basically something that it kept, you know, that Georgia and South Carolina were about to walk out. And so it settled that. Now, also gave Congress the power to regulate the slave trade after 20 years. Okay. So, you know, after 20 years, regulate, that is, okay. So, i.e., ban the slave trade, you know, basically the international slave trade, an international slave trade after 20 years. So that's the 3/5 compromise. Now, as you go into, now, of course, you've got another one as far as ratification. You know, we could think of the Bill of Rights, you know, so ratification. You know, when you think about ratification, the Bill of Rights could represent a compromise between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. Okay. So that's where you would get into. So the Bill of Rights, you know, basically, you know, moderate Anti-Federalists agreed to support the Constitution. Okay. So agreed to support the Constitution in return for the addition of a Bill of Rights, that would protect the rights, you know, basically the rights of individuals and of the states. Okay, remember that the Anti-Federalists were very into states' rights, and so our Constitution, both at the Constitutional Convention and during ratification, is the product of a great deal of compromise. That's one thing that is a major enduring understanding for the exam, to understand that our Constitution is a product of compromise. Okay, so ratification. All right, then we could get into I would get into, you know, Henry Clay's compromises. Okay, so Henry Clay's compromises, there are three. You know, Henry Clay was called the Great Compromiser. Okay, so the Great Compromiser. Now, so as far as that goes, Henry Clay's compromisers, what we've got there, you know, as far as that goes, let's go ahead and restart at restart one. All right. So the Missouri Compromise. Okay, the Missouri Compromise. Basically, what is going to happen to Missouri? That the Talmadge Amendment tried to stop Missouri from coming in as a totally like slave state. But what happened here is Henry Clay worked out a compromise here. Okay, so basically, what you've got here is Missouri, you know, admitted as a slave state. Maine, previously part of Massachusetts, is admitted as a free state. Okay. Now, what we've got here, note that this is the balance between the slave and free states. Okay. So this is kind of setting the tone here. This is about the balance between slave and free states. And then the Louisiana Purchase territories above the 3630 line. 3630 line will be closed to slavery. Okay. So what was going on here, it preserved the balance of free and slave states. Okay. And remember, that was the objective at that time, was to preserve the balance of free and slave states and keep one side from getting, you know, majority. Now, next is the Nullification Compromise. Okay. So the Nullification Compromise. Okay. So the Nullification Compromise is basically, you know, like, you know, basically South Carolina threatened to nullify the tariff. Okay. President Jackson, threatened to use force to collect. Okay. Now, finally, what happened here is that Henry Clay, okay, so Henry Clay proposed a compromise tariff, which South Carolina accepted. Okay. So you have Henry Clay having a second compromise. Okay. And then the third compromise is, of course, the Compromise of 1850. Okay. So that is the last of Clay's compromises. And so that has got several things here. Now, first of all, California's admitted, so basically California admitted as a free state. Okay. Now, here's the thing that you see a change in tone now, because the backdrop here is the free soil movement has picked up. All right. The free soil movement has picked up. And so you start to see, something else over there with the free soil movement. Now, let's see. I might have had a little mess. Let's see. Hopefully everything's still working with my connection and such. So let me make sure is everybody getting a good connection? Let me just check the chat real quick and make sure all of that's there. Okay. So as far as that stuff, okay. So excellent. All right. So yeah, thank y'all. Looks like you're having okay. So yeah, Henry Clay. I mean, here's the thing that that ridiculous stuff that President Trump said about if Andrew Jackson had been around, that maybe the Civil War wouldn't have happened. Andrew Jackson was a hothead. I mean, the thing is, Andrew Jackson was somebody who's not somebody you would want around during this, when the Civil War was about to happen. Now, Henry Clay, that's one thing. If you think about the death of Henry Clay could be seen as a, causal factor. It's like Henry Clay's generation was much more dedicated to this sort of compromise. So as far as this is concerned here, let me go into this. California admitted as a free state. Now, there's not going to be a slave state admitted. Okay. So in return, there was a stronger fugitive slave law. Okay. A stronger fugitive slave law. Now, note the stronger fugitive slave law was the most controversial provision. Okay. So most controversial provision. Okay, so a stronger fugitive slave law. And then what we've got here, so we got a stronger fugitive slave law. And then what we're going to do is I kind of parse these out into like twos, because I look at this as a trade-off. California is admitted as a slave state. Now, that's something that, the free soil people that's not going to be divided into a slave state and a free state or anything like that. Now, then, the fugitive slave law, now that is helping specifically the upper South. Okay. So as far as that goes, that's helping the upper South. So I look at this as a trade. Now, the thing is, now we're going to go to the West. And what we're going to do here is we're going to have popular sovereignty. Okay. Popular sovereignty. Basically the settlers decide slavery in the Mexican Cession. Okay, the popular sovereignty, settlers decide slavery in the Mexican Cession. Now, the other thing is, how are we going to get some of the free soilers to go along with that? Well, what we're going to do here is we're going to get Texas to cede land, okay? What I would call the Texas bailout, okay? The Texas still had $10 million of war debt. So basically, the federal government paid Texas, paid off Texas $10 million war debt in return for Texas ceding its western land claims to the Mexican Cession. Okay. So basically Texas had this ridiculous border claim, but this was going to be solved by compromise. Now, then we see the last one, okay? And what they do here is there's debate over the slave trade in Washington, or slavery in Washington, D.C. There are northern congressmen that want no slavery in Washington, D.C. And then there are, southern congressmen who are like, want slavery and slave trade and all that. But to compromise, what they do is because they say, look, I mean, we got foreign visitors and stuff. They don't need to be seeing slave trading going on. And so they abolish the slave trade in Washington, D.C. Okay. So, basically, Southern congressmen can still bring their slaves into Washington, D.C., but they cannot, you cannot sell slaves. You cannot buy or sell slaves in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, with the Civil War, they take a little break. Okay. They take a little break here. And so that's where you go into as far as this goes, you've got, basically the Civil War and Reconstruction, which represent from a compromise position a failure here. Okay. But, you've got here after Henry Clay's compromise, they take a break. Now, basically the end of Reconstruction. Okay. Now, this is, the compromise of 1877. Okay. So now, this is something that, this is, an informal. Okay. It's kind of like the corrupt bargain. Like there's no paper trail for the corrupt bargain, but you're like, well, that probably happened with Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams. But at the same time, there may not be, there may not be that. There's not a paper trail, but there's obviously some kind of at least informal understanding. Okay, so understanding, not official. Okay, now basically Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican nominee, would get all disputed electoral votes. Okay, in the 1876 election. Okay, now he'll get all the disputed votes in the 1876 election. Now, on the other hand, why is it that these three southern states of Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana go along with this? Now, the other side of this is that the federal government will pull out all remaining Union troops. Okay, so all remaining troops stationed in the South to enforce Reconstruction policy. Okay, now, so that's basically kind of a return to that compromise mentality. Now, as Keith mentioned in the hangout, this is basically abandoning the African Americans in the South. Okay, so that's something something as far as that goes. All right, so in those terms, let's see what we've got here. Now, the Compromise of 1877. Now, with that, I think we've basically gotten through a lot of compromise, because the thing is, we don't really have, like, one thing about compromise, it's more of a feature of an aristocratic republic than a democratic republic. It's like democracy is not about compromise. Democracy is about 50% plus one and getting your way. And building the small, which if you look at like the healthcare bill that just passed in the House today, that's democracy. That is not like republicanism, small r, because in a republic, you're supposed to build consensus, whereas in a democracy, you're just going for a bare majority. So basically, the House passed this healthcare legislation by a very, very narrow majority. And that's not like we live in a republic. Let's do this together. So I think we see a lot less compromises nowadays, because, when you see that, that old classical republicanism is not really, is not really a big force nowadays. Now, as far as, World War I and the U.S. involvement in World War I, one thing I do here is I like to, my daughter, when she was younger, we'd watch Dora. All right, we watched Dora. And so I love Dora. Okay. Dora is both a woman and a minority. So AP would love her too, Peyton. And so as far as, as far as that kind of stuff, Dora. Now, oh, why is this thing? It looks like it's having a hard time here. Okay, my thing here is showing that like it's still having some trouble here. Oh, okay, so we're good. Okay, got it, got it, got it. All right, so we're good. It looked like what okay, so we're good. We're connected and all of that kind of stuff. All right, and I'll see what I can do. Oh gosh, thank you so much, Olivia. You're oh wait, Olivia, you like bought in. Like Olivia's like my new friend. Like Olivia, make sure I like follow you back or whatever. I got a lot of follows tonight, so I need to figure that out. But how would I? Let's see. So, let's see. It was on that fireside chat thing. Okay. She really did. I mean, Olivia did a great job making sure her question got answered, which was really, which was really great. Very creative. Oh gosh, a lot of people, they thought once I mentioned it as a strategy, now everybody's like all bandwagoning and all that. Okay. So as far, oh my Lord, people. Wow, this was quite the I got some spam there. Okay, so Olivia, let's see. So we'll go ahead and yeah, so we've got that. Yeah, there we go. All right. Get her that follow back there. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, as far as that goes, let me go ahead and let me make a little note here. World War One. I like to talk about Dora. Okay, yeah. Let me finish the session and I'll share this document. I don't mind sharing the document. I'll put it on. You know what? Actually, I'll go ahead and make a Google Drive, something on Google Drive right now. Get it on like Google Docs. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so drive.google.com. I hope most of y'all are in mountain time or on the West Coast because it's very, very late on the East Coast and people need to be going to bed. I'm going to hang around for a little bit. Okay. I know that I said just till like, but I'm going to hang around for a little bit, make sure everybody gets their money's worth and all of that kind of stuff. But let me go ahead and create this document. And let's see. So I'm going to put this on Google Drive. Let's see. So compromises in U.S. history. Okay. So compromises. Okay, compromises in U.S. history. All right, so let me go ahead and grab this. Okay. Okay, now of course Google Drive has messed with the formatting and all of that kind of stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and get this. Let's see, anybody with the link can comment. We'll go ahead and do that. All right. So I'll go ahead and share this. I'm about to put it into the chat here. Okay, so I'm about to put this into the chat. All right. So um all right. So yeah, but really sleep is a good thing. Sleep is a good thing. Yeah, so y'all need to go to bed. Y'all really do. But as far as that goes, yeah, if it's still like 8:30, 9:30, y'all are still good, but you need to get some sleep tonight. All right. So when it comes to World War One, Dora, you know how the map's always like, bridge, forest, grandma's house. And so what I do with World War One is I say cruise ship, like while we got the provocations, cruise ship, telegram, submarine. Say it with me. Cruise ship, telegram, submarine. One more time. Cruise ship, telegram, submarine. And so the thing is, like the cruise ship, of course, is the Lusitania. And while this doesn't get us into the war, I still think of it as a provocation because it did make a lot of Americans angry. And so, I mean, it was very close. And then when Woodrow Wilson runs for, re-election in 1916, the slogan is he kept us out of war. Now the operative word being kept, that's past tense, people. And so then the telegram, the Zimmerman note. Now that is where Germany gets, sends a telegram to Mexico and says that, hey, we know the United States took some land for you. You might want that back. And, so then they're like, Mexico thinks about it. They're like, no, but the telegram gets taken by the British. The British intercept it. And then at the opportune time, they show it to the American government. The American government's ticked because the telegram says that we are, basically it tells Mexico that we are resuming our policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. And, as far as that goes, we are, unrestricted submarine warfare. And we want to, what do you call it? We hope the United States doesn't get involved, but if we do, if the United States does get involved, we want you, Mexico, to attack the United States, and we'll send you help and money and all that, and we'll give you back, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona or whatever, or, something like that. They're giving them some land back in the Mexican cession. Now, the Mexicans didn't take the bait, but basically what you're looking at there is that the United States is pretty ticked. And so the main thing is not only you have that Zimmerman note, but also the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare. Because see how the Germans kept the United States out of the war after the Lusitania is that the Germans promised that they were no longer going to, engage in unrestricted submarine warfare. Okay. So as far as oh, nice. Thank you so much, Isabel. Isabel has taken notes from the session, and it looks like she has shared them. Let me go ahead and check on that. Okay, so we've got, thank you so much, Izzy. All right, that is great. That is great. Okay, so as far as that, I'm going to go ahead and share with the participants. We'll go ahead. Wow, these are handwritten notes, which one thing, Izzy, handwritten notes are much more effective for comprehension than typed notes. Research studies have shown this time and time again. Okay, so session notes. Okay, so thank you, Izzy. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to send these. All right, I'm going to send these over. All right, so this is great. So glad for this. All right, so Izzy has shared her notes, and I'm sharing those. All right, so as far as that goes, there we are. Yes, good night, Jordan. Good night. Yeah, if you're on the East Coast, go to bed. I'm going to hang around for a few minutes for people who don't need to go to bed. But yeah, East Coast, y'all really should go to bed. In all seriousness, and that's just as far as that goes. Now, let's see. So basically, cruise ship, telegram, submarine. All right, that's what I do on that. Best of luck to everybody. As far as that, be a great book to learn. That's a good taking the subject test. Yeah, I'm not sure. Believe it or not, I haven't done a lot of reading lately. Probably should do more reading. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Izzy, for that help there. All right, so California. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and kind of take, so thanks for coming, Caroline. Best of luck on the APUSH exam. So then we've got, let's see, we had the New Deal. Okay, now the New Deal, this is the thing. What I want to talk about for a second is Herbert Hoover. Now, there is this idea that Herbert Hoover, there are a lot of people think that Herbert Hoover just sat there and did nothing, which isn't the case. Herbert Hoover did some things. It's just, first of all, he did the wrong things. And second of all, he wasn't quite ambitious enough on some of the things. He was a bit tone deaf. And so Hoover, first of all, what he decided to do was okay, I'm an engineer. I fix things. I'm not going to just sit there and wait for this to, calm down. Hoover signed a tax increase in the law, which is about the stupidest thing you can do if the economy's sluggish. It's just why increase taxes if the economy's sluggish? If anything, you need to cut taxes. And then because, before Keynesian economics came in with FDR, we need to run a balanced budget. So we're going to have to collect more taxes. And so that was stupid. And then he signs the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which basically, puts this, the Hawley-Smoot tariff essentially, it's the second highest tariff in U.S. history. The highest tariff in U.S. history was the tariff of 1828, or the tariff of abominations. And so that was, as far as that goes, that's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking at there. All right. Oh yeah, I've got a lot. I just haven't done a whole lot of reading as far as a survey level thing, later. Now, if you're just looking for SAT 2, then you probably should get the AMSCO book if you don't have that already. Brianna, best of luck on your test. Okay. Yeah, the Hoovervilles. All right. Now, so the thing is Hoover also didn't want to do direct relief. And that's the thing about the New Deal, is that FDR is okay with direct relief. Okay. FDR is a direct relief guy. And that's really what you're, what you're looking at as far as that. And of course, when you look at the agencies, what I think about is relief, recovery, reform. That, relief, that basically the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Now, this was basically taking young men and putting them in work camps and that sort of thing, and building parks and, state and federal parks. And then basically most of the money they made would be, All right, still in like last review mode. But most of the money that they made would be sent home to their families. All right, so they wouldn't necessarily keep a lot of that money, be sent home to their families. Well, the family gets the advantage of one less mouth to feed, and also getting a check sent home. So that's relief, providing relief, also, making these, make work, shovel ready projects. So the PWA and the WPA, these were, which the CCC was also a make work project. Keynesian economics says if you create these shovel ready projects, the economy will recover. Now, remember, the economy didn't really recover during the New Deal. So it's like, that's one of those things that the strategies that FDR used didn't necessarily lead to economic recovery. All right. Yes. And may the fourth be with y'all, and Cinco to APUSH. Yeah. I use AMSCO as my primary text. And so I'm very good. Yeah. AMSCO is great. I call it the APUSH Bible. All right. So, and then as far as that, ladies and gentlemen, does anybody have any quick questions for me? Because I'm about to King Andrew the First, Izzy. Okay. Now, Izzy, what time zone are you in? Will you let me know? Will you let me know what time zone you're in? All right. So everybody claim your time zone. Okay. So everybody claim your time zone. Okay. Everybody claim your time zone. All right. So oh, okay. So I didn't say, oh, by Clay. Okay. By Clay. I see what we're doing here. All right. So just everybody claim your time zone real quick. Okay. Okay. So Izzy, your Pacific time. I'm not keeping you up. So let's see. Izzy, you gave us those notes. That was very nice of you. King Andrew the First. Now, this was a piece of Whig propaganda. Oh yes, Kelly is in Korea. So yeah. Okay. Okay. So we've got a lot of people here now. Emily, about time for bed. Okay. Really about time for y'all to go to bed. You need to get some sleep. Now, those of you who are Mountain Time, Pacific Time, King Andrew the First, it's basically like the Whigs are saying that, the Whigs are saying that he's governing like a king, that Andrew Jackson is not a creature of democracy, that he is governing as a king. And so, that basically people should oppose him. Okay, so, there's that poster of it, that political cartoon with him trampling on the Constitution, you see? So as far as that going. All right. So that's, basically a piece of Whig propaganda is what you're looking at there. Okay. So, you know what? I'll tell you what we're doing now. I'll tell you what we're doing. All right. Yeah. One thing here. Here's the link to join me via cam. Somebody come in on the camera. All right. I want somebody to come in on the camera and ask me a question. The Watergate scandal. Basically, what's funny about the Watergate scandal is Nixon won like a 49 state victory in 1972. And that's where he was, he won a 49 state victory. And, that was when his campaign people got caught. CREEP, Committee to Re-elect the President. Okay. So as far as that, his campaign committee was CREEP. Okay. Committee to re-elect the, let's see. So yeah. So re-elect the president. Okay. And what they did is they basically broke into the Democratic Party headquarters. Karina, thank you so much for coming. All right. We got somebody here. Thank you. Thank y'all. All right. So let's see what we've got here. All right, Brianna, you got, okay, so we got Brianna, we got Zachary. Now, make sure if you're not talking, if there's any background noise that you're muting, okay? That there's not, so self-mute, like when you're not actually talking. But Brianna, I think you were here first. What's your question?
Land ordinances.
Okay, such as, like, you're talking about, like, the Northwest Ordinance?
Yeah, that type of thing, and, like, how the Ohio River Valley was all settled and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so as far as that goes, I would say, like, as far as what you need for the exam, if the Northwest Ordinance comes up, like, this is the thing, the Northwest Ordinance is seen as the success story of the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation get a bad rap, but, the Northwest Ordinance is like, hey, the states got to agree on something. And so as far as that goes, the Northwest Ordinance, the northeastern states gave up their land claims in the West. Okay, so that area between the Ohio River and the Mississippi River. And so they gave up voluntarily their land claims, and it was decided that this land will, one, be parceled into new states. Okay, so they divide that into townships, parcel it into new states, all that kind of stuff. And then the other part of that is that this that this area will be closed to slavery. Okay, the other part of that is that it will be closed to slavery. Let's everybody make sure if you're not talking. Let's see, we got some background noise coming from somewhere. All right. Also, ladies and gentlemen, headphones, like earbuds, because that way I'm not hearing myself talking. So go ahead if you're on the call. See, we got the young man here. Max has headphones on. Okay, so we can't hear anything where Max is because he's wearing headphones. So grab some headphones or earbuds if you're not muted, and that way, we won't. Yeah, it's not as invasive that way. So the Northwest Ordinance, like they're making new states, and it's going to be closed to slavery, and that was done. All right. So Izzy, the note taker, is with us. All right. So as far as that goes. That's basically what I would say there, that but know that it was close to slavery and it was a success story of the Articles of Confederation. That would be as far as what I'd tell you. That should be enough.
Okay.
All
Thanks.
right. And let's see what have we got coming up. Who's next? Everybody's looking.
I have another. I have another question. So for synthesis, are we allowed to use European history for this test?
Yes. The thing is that the synthesis does not need to be U.S. history. Like when I was reading for Euro last summer, there was somebody who used ancient Egypt synthesis in their LAQ. And I was just like, you know what? This is bizarre. I'm just curious. I peeked back at the DBQ. Ancient freaking Egypt. This person, I think, just went into the test saying look, I'm going to use ancient. I think this person made it some kind of game and I'm going to use ancient Egypt synthesis. And they both worked. It was just oh my goodness. This person just was must have been just crazy about ancient Egypt. And it was wow. So yeah, you can use synthesis from any kind of history, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, European. What did you take last year?
AP Euro.
All right, AP Euro. Yeah, it's just I wore this shirt to my cookout tonight, just to one of my students why are you wearing that? I was just I'm just wearing it to be ironic, and then I just didn't have time to change out of it for the APUSH hangout. But glad to see AP Euro people here. All right, well, Brianna, thank you very much on that. And what have we got? Max, you got a question for me?
Oh, I've got a question for you. I've got a question from myself. We got Matthew and Robert. We're wondering about major turning points in World War One.
Now, what do you mean by that?
What would you say changed the war itself from being what it used to, what it was eventually going to become, which would...
That kind of sounds to me, it's your question sounds extraneous, and that's part of my job to kind of tell you, because we're right before the exam. It sounds a little extraneous. I would say that World War One, basically the provocations for the United States getting involved and the United States wanting to be neutral, and then the Versailles Treaty debate.
Okay.
That's really what you need to be focusing on rather than the war itself. Now, you might, note that African Americans, of course, were in segregated units and typically relegated to non-combat duties. But there's not really, I've never really seen it. Now, also war propaganda. That's another thing that you want to look at. But I've never really run into anything where the military history of World War One came up on an APUS history exam. You see?
Okay.
So that would be my best advice would be to focus on that stuff. Now, what time zone are you in, Max?
I'm on the West Coast.
Okay, you're on the West Coast, so you got a little bit of time, but I would focus on, we talked about the provocations. I've got a little video that's pretty short, on the Versailles Treaty debate, talking about that. So I would focus more on that than I would on World War One itself. Okay. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now the thing is, some of you, if you're done asking your question, I might ask you to, because we've got 34 viewers and I've got the maximum people in here. So some of you, if you've already asked a question or something like that, or you can always come back and ask another question, but we might want to keep some spots open. But I've still got some people to get to anyway. So I've got to now, Zachary, you were here pretty early.
Yeah, my question is, what would you say?
Let's see, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
So what would you say of all the presidents, such as the Monroe Doctrine? What should we be looking for? Things along that nature. From which presidents are really important?
Well, that's one of those things that now the presidential doctrines would be something to kind of get into. But the thing about the exam is we got to remember it can be very, very random. All right. And so when it comes down to it, gosh, Brianna's excited over there. She's like happy about something. All right. So as far as the all right. So the thing is that the Monroe Doctrine. Now, let me just rattle some off, okay? Now, I would say that the first very important doctrine would be in Washington's farewell address. That is a doctrine that we are not going to make permanent, we're not going to get entangled with the world. Now, Jefferson basically doubles down. Now, what's funny is a lot of people think that Washington said no entangling alliances. That was actually Jefferson. And so Jefferson was peace and friendship and commerce with all the world, with all nations, entangling alliances with none. All right. Gosh. Okay. So, and I'm guessing, Murray, you must be a West Coaster. Or that's a lamp. Okay. I thought that was like sunshine or whatever.
No, I'm on the East Coast.
Okay. Oh my, go to bed. So the first doctrine, I would say Washington's farewell address. Okay. Jefferson doubles down. Then you've got the Monroe Doctrine. Now, after that, of course, the United States is really not that active in foreign policy. And so you get to Teddy Roosevelt's, Roosevelt corollary. Now, I've seen some things here as far as, Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson. Roosevelt, that's like the imperialism. So Roosevelt is about the big stick. Taft is about dollar diplomacy, big Bill's dollar diplomacy. And then Wilson is about moral diplomacy. And so that's something. Now, FDR, which actually FDR is usually associated with it, but Hoover was setting this up as well. But Hoover and FDR are doing the good neighbor policy. And so the good neighbor policy is basically we're backing off imperialism and we are getting out of we are getting out of intervening in Latin America. The Truman Doctrine. Containment, specifically in Europe and Asia. Eisenhower Doctrine, mostly about, the Middle East. Then we would get to, then you would get into the Nixon Doctrine, as far as the Nixon Doctrine, which is that we are not going to provide troops. We are going to provide assistance, military assistance, financial assistance, but not troops. And so then there is the now, of course, Reagan wants to roll, Nixon's about to taunt. Reagan wants to roll back communism. And then you've got the Bush Doctrine. If we see any period 9 stuff, recent stuff, George W. Bush, the doctrine of preventative war, which, is something that we will strike first if we think that we're going to be attacked if we don't strike. So we're not going to wait for them to hit us. If y'all just give me a second, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to go refill my water. Okay. Then I'll take a few more questions. Y'all think about asking me quick questions because I'm going to have to go to bed pretty soon because I got to get on the road to Virginia Beach. I'm doing a live AP Euro review over there on Saturday. So I'll be right back.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty insane stuff,
Does anybody know anything about foreign policies?
That was me. I kept emailing him.
Under which president?
Well, I mean, my teacher just said that there was, they haven't asked a foreign policy question in a while, so I was looking for stuff to use.
Chances are you're not going to get a foreign policy question if they haven't been out for a while.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and say any East Coasters. Let's put East Coasters first in line. Ask your question. Go to bed. All right, Murray. Did you say you're an East Coaster?
Yeah.
Okay, Murray. Ask me your question. I'm gonna answer your question. then you're going to relax, watch the Hip Hughes exam meditation or whatever, and go get some rest. Okay. You need some rest.
Okay. So my teacher, he thinks that there'll be something about like a lot like civil rights on there. And so I was just wondering, like, for like maybe period 7 or 8, like late 1900s, what would, or maybe like early to late 1900s, what would be some of the more important things to know, like as far as like MLK, but like other
Well,
stuff?
now the thing is, remember, I'm not a fan of gaming the exam,
Yeah.
trying to guess what's going to be on there. Now, if you look at the APUSH review page that I shared, and you'll be able to find my period 8 notes. Like if you scroll down to period 8, you'll see period 8 notes. And in there, I've got like the Civil Rights Acts. Like basically, remember the Civil Rights Act of 1957 was bark. It wasn't bite. And then you had the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, which said like, you know, Priyanka, I got the video call. Excellent, excellent. And so, you know, I've got that all on that document. So what I'm going to tell you to do is take a look at those period 8 notes. And I've got some things about like civil rights and that sort of thing. You know what? You know what I would tell you?
Mm-hmm.
If I were you, I would go to bed. I would wake up in the morning and then, but seriously, any East Coasters, I would advise going to bed because you don't want to stare at a screen anymore. Okay. Because that's going to keep you awake. You know, it's like you need to go ahead and now, if you want to fall asleep reading your review book or something like that, but, you know, get the screen away from you. But tomorrow morning, wake up, look at my period 8 notes. Now, also, if you want to print, do you have a printer at home? If you have a printer at home, you can just print out my period 8 notes. Just like I got a printer right here. You know, so you can print out the period 8 notes. Okay. So I would recommend just looking at that sometime before the test tomorrow morning. But with you being on the East Coast, you need to go to bed. I wish there were a way that I could like have banned people from buying the Fireside Chat thing. Of course, it's not in my best interest, but East Coasters. So Murray, go. Let me get Murray to go to bed. So Murray, can you go to bed?
Yes.
Okay. Get some rest. Staying up all night is not going to help you tomorrow. You're going to have to write a DBQ and an LEQ. Okay. So Murray, have a wonderful night and let me know how the exam goes. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Go to
Bye.
bed.
I'm
Bye.
also on the East Coast. Where can I find those notes?
Okay. Who else is East Coast?
I'm on the
You
East Coast.
consider Central, East Coast.
Central. I want to get rid of
Okay.
Eastern time first. Okay. So
Yep,
if you're
that's
Eastern
me.
time, how many
Me too.
of you? Eastern time. Priyanka, are you Eastern time?
No, I'm West Coast.
Okay, West Coast. Zachary, Central time?
Nope, Eastern.
Oh, Eastern. Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
Okay, Zachary, I have a question for you already. Is there anything I can say to you that'll make you go to bed?
Where can I find your notes on each period?
Okay, now I don't have notes on every period, okay, but let me show you what I've got here, okay? So I'm going to let you just kind of see what I've got here. And let's see. So going here and let's see. So if you go to tomrichey.net, courses, APUS history, APUSH review, or if you're on the Hangouts page, you can just go straight to that. Okay. Or you know what you can do? You can Google APUSH review. Okay. And just let's see, just go ahead and oh gosh, this is funny. I should join the Know Nothing party. Okay, I'm retweeting this kid. All right, I'm gonna read that. Is that not funny? Is that not funny? Okay, yeah,
Me.
that's hilarious.
I feel that on a personal level.
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and this is getting this kid doesn't follow me, but so what? All right, so he's already got like some all right, he doesn't need my help. All right, so, that is hilarious. That is hilarious. My goodness, kid. All right, so he knows nothing for the APUSH exam. Oh my Lord. Okay, so anyway, ladies and gentlemen, back to I was on Google, and so if you just Google APUSH review, it's going to be about the third hit. Okay, APUSH review, tomrichey.net. Now I've got a draft of Supreme Court cases. Everybody buy my app. All right. How many of y'all got the app?
Yes, me.
Hey, you know what? There are people, let me tell you, there are people who don't understand like what the app's for. Like for people that understand what the app's for, they get it. It's like, yes, it's a trivia app, but it's helping you drill the content. There are some people in the App Store, they just don't get that, and they're giving it like bad reviews. If y'all are able to like go give it a good review, I would like, you see? Yeah, I would very much. Yeah, if you'll give it a good review, because the thing is, it's just, I made it for a certain reason, and some people, they're just, I don't know what they're expecting for $3.99, but it's like, look, I mean, it's a surprise. You paid $3.99. It's a trivia app. So if y'all can give me a good review, I would appreciate that so much, because we're all friends here. All right. And so the thing is, if you scroll down a little bit past the test taking stuff, then you can go to like now the period 8. That's where I've got those period 8 notes. And so that'll take you to Google Drive. I've got detailed notes for period 8 and period 9. And so that's where I've got like all of this stuff here going through all the, now what I've got here is a graph. I've got MacArthur and Truman, which somebody asked me about that earlier. I've got, you know, these different presidents and their Cold War policy. I've got a column here talking about continuity and change over time and what's going on there. So, you know, that takes you all the way through the Cold War. So these are, you know, it's a draft. I've got, you know, liberalism, conservatism. Then I've got those acts here. Okay. So, you know, this is just stuff that I've worked out through like tutoring sessions. Now, also, I've got the civil rights movement. So the progressive era, then the 1950s and 60s, a bit on second wave feminism. Okay. So I go into this and I'm putting the antebellum period versus the civil rights movement, all of that. Betty Friedan going to Gloria Steinem, you know, and that sort of thing. So basically, got notes for period 8. Then I've got, you know, done a very similar thing for period 9. Okay, so going over this here. Okay, so as far as that goes, which for period 9, I actually give you like some context for the conservative movement and talking about like the credibility gap and all of the economic stuff that is, you know, that's leading to that. And basically some things that are, you know, the conservative movement's rising, but also some things that are, you know, assisting the conservative movement. So lots of stuff there. But then again, like I said, if you're on like the East Coast, so Zachary, this is great stuff for you to look at when you wake up in the morning. But I feel like if you don't let your mind wind down, you're going to stay up all night. And then tomorrow you're just going to be like, and then you're like, I mean, if you were taking a multiple choice test, whatever, but you've got to write essays tomorrow. All right.
Thank you so much for your help.
Hey, and thank you, Zachary, for supporting my work and all that good stuff. So I have a good night. Any other East Coasters?
Bye, Zach.
Okay. Bye. Any other East Coasters? All right. Central Time. Where's Central Time? Okay, let's get rid of y'all. Clay, all right. Henry, not Henry Clay or anything like that.
Actually, he's my great uncle.
Oh, okay, awesome. So wait, are you serious? Like the Henry Clay?
You're honestly serious.
I was named after him, and there we can actually draw a direct lineage to him. So
well,
cool.
That is so cool.
Right.
That's
so, yeah, I mean, awesome. Now, yeah, you know, it's actually gonna be like a pickup line in this crowd. You know, have fun with that while you can. All right, so Clay, what you got for me?
Well, I wanted to know sort of how, as I know how Roosevelt had the big stick diplomacy, and then it went to Taft, then Wilson. How did that change affect like how other nations like sort of reacted to us and stuff like that? Do you know what I mean?
Well, one thing is that you know, the big stick, you know, is, and also the thing is that Wilson is also meddling in Latin America. You know, Wilson's basically like, oh, this regime in Latin America wasn't democratically elected. So there is a very paternalistic, like, you know, bent to Wilson's foreign policy as well. So during this era of imperialism, there is a great deal of resentment. And what's important to note there is that goes into the Cuban Revolution. Okay, that goes into the Cuban Revolution. And so that's really, you see that Latin American resentment that's coming from, you know, the U.S. attempts to dominate that. But one of the things to note is the good neighbor policy that the United States, during the presidencies of Hoover and FDR, that they are, during the presidency of Hoover and FDR, they are, basically doing this good neighbor policy where they are moving away from the same kind of interventionism.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Well, Clay, does that sound good enough to persuade you to get some rest?
Maybe so.
Maybe.
I've been up till 1 a lot, so it'll be good.
The thing is, that exam's at 8 in the morning. I'm telling y'all want some rest. Y'all want some rest. I can't make you do it. So, Clay, if you want to hang out for a little bit, I can't stop you, but I can certainly encourage you to go to bed. Okay, now, Central Time. Anybody else, Central Time? All right,
everybody.
Me.
All right, Karina.
Bye, Clay.
Yeah, so
Karina, did I say your name correctly?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, excellent.
How often does Native American policies come up on the test?
Okay, now of course, Native American tribes, I've seen that as like, that's more directly like in the concept outline, being able to know that like, okay, the Indians were diverse. They did more than hunt and gather. Like only the northernmost Indian tribes subsisted just by hunting and gathering. All the others practiced agriculture to some extent or another. In the Southeast, lots of agriculture. Now, Indian policy, the main thing, of course, you've got, of course, manifest destiny is a big thing. White America keeps moving west. But, Jackson, knowing about Indian removal at that time, I think is important. Also the Dawes Act. Yes, the Dawes Act. Yeah, you've got the Dawes Act and the Dawes Plan. Does that confuse anybody else? You've got the Dawes Act and the Dawes Plan. Now, they'll never ask you that in a way that'll confuse you. So as long as you understand that one is like Indian policy and one not. Now, one thing to note here is that that's another thing that FDR did. Like FDR actually restored the reservation system. Like the Dawes Act cut up the reservation system and said, we're giving plots to each family. And then the rest of it will give to white people. And so as far as that goes, they go from there. Now, I don't know if Geraldine's still here or not, but the thing is, what time period would you use to synthesize FDR's New Deal? Again, everybody remember synthesis. Is it based on the topic? What is synthesis based on? Synthesis has to complement your thesis. Okay, so make sure that you've got that. But synthesis goes along with the thesis. Now, some may synthesize better than others, but just remember, you got to look at the prompt first. So as far as Indian policy, like the same time as the good neighbor policy, FDR reinstates the reservation system. Okay, so basically the Dawes Act ends up being, the Dawes Act ends up, being kind of superseded. So there are a few twists and turns in Indian policy. Now, of course, the Indian Wars later on. The thing is that, remember this exam, it's just like, it'll come up with the most random stuff and we have no idea what's going to be on it. But those would be the things that I would look at chiefly as far as that no pun intended. But for the, for the Indian policy, that would be, the Dawes Act, Indian removal. Those would be the biggest things I think would come up.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Karina. Let's see. Who else is Central Time? Central Time. All right. Yes, sir. Zach, what you got for me?
I'm actually on the East Coast, but I was wondering, what do we?
Yeah, we've got an East Coaster. All right. So,
good night, everyone.
All right. So, yes.
Bye.
All right. So, Zach, what you got for me?
On the test, what do we get? Do we get the rubric like with the point systems and stuff that tells you what to write for the DBQs and the essays?
Okay, you will not get the rubric. Now, have you seen a rubric before?
Yeah, my teacher gave me one.
Okay. Do any of y'all's teacher, y'all know they use my rubric?
Yes. All the time.
Really?
Excellent. All right. So the thing is, what they're going to give you. Okay. So APUSH history exam. Okay. So I'm about to share my screen here. So if I keep talking and it looks like I think I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not, let me know. Let me know. All right. So as far as that goes, let me open up the free response questions, and I'm going to share the screen. All right. Okay, so as far as what we got here, so you're going to get this, the free response questions, and of course the first 4 are going to be your SAQs. Now, as far as the DBQ, they're not going to give you a rubric, but they're going to basically restate the rubric here, you see?
Yeah.
Thesis, argument development, use of documents, sourcing the documents, contextualization, outside evidence synthesis. Now, the thing is, look at the rubric again tomorrow morning. Make sure you know, I mean, because the thing is, you don't want to have to read this stuff. All right. So the thing is APUSH, DBQ, rubric. Okay. So if we look that up, all right. So go over this tomrichey.net, see what this guy's got. All right. So basically, contextualization. Now, remember, the way my rubric is set up is that I put it in the order that it should appear. So first paragraph, contextualization and thesis. Body paragraphs, document use, document analysis, outside evidence, argumentation. And then once you finish that, your synthesis, okay? Extend the argument, synthesis. Now, synthesis sometimes, you know, it's like some topics it works better than others. I mean, it's something you want to definitely attempt, but sometimes it may come to you better than others. But the main thing is to understand that in that first in the first paragraph, I want to get my contextualization, my thesis point. So by the time I write that first paragraph, I want 2 points. And then in the body paragraphs, 4 points. Use the documents, analyze the documents. Make sure you use all of them because you need 6, and you're going to misinterpret. You'll probably misinterpret one. You'll probably screw up. And so use 7 so that you can have 6. I mean, that's the thing. People screw up. That's the thing. Now, except Bailey probably doesn't screw up ever. But people screw up sometimes. Okay. And so use all 7, analyze 5 of them. What I tell people is like, analyze as many documents as you can. Because it's really very simple. Now, the other thing is when you do document analysis, there's no requirement that you use different forms of analysis. So you could use purpose every time. You know, the author's purpose here is to this. Now, it's very boring, but it gets you the point. So, if you're, you might know what you're good at. And so, you might know like, okay, this is like what I'm good at. I'm very good at doing purpose or context or something like that. So what I would encourage you to do is have like one of those things that's kind of a fallback for you, use it. So you are using the documents, analyzing the documents. If you are organizing everything into an argument, now that's one thing in that writing clinic. Now, East Coasters need to go to bed, but I'm a big fan of T-charts. Anybody use T-charts for the DBQ? Okay, so we got some of you over there. You know what a T-chart is, and you use a T-chart. And you're basically making sure that the way your essay is laid out is based on the thesis. That argument point is primarily making sure that the essay is obviously thesis driven. And if you're putting the documents in conversation with each other, even better. So that's what you're trying to do with that, and then bring in a quality piece of outside information. Now, what we're talking about is 2 to 3 sentences. We're not talking about just name dropping, but 2 to 3 sentences. And then finally, at the end, your synthesis. But you need to have that in mind before you even go in there. And then as far as the LEQ rubric, remember that although there are those 4 skills, okay, so APUSH, LEQ, rubric. All right, let's see. So, oh man, look at that. I got above the College Board on that one. All right. Thank you, Google. And so basically, the thing to remember is that no matter what the LEQ is on, 4 out of 6 points are the same. All right, so 4 out of 6 points are the same. And so as far as that goes, it's only the historical thinking skill that's different. But it's very nuanced, okay? Because the thing is, when you think about these skills, periodization, continuity and change, and comparison, they're all 3, if you think about it, they're all 3 kind of the same thing, okay? So comparison, I've got A here and I've got B here. How are they the same? How are they different? Periodization, there's a turning point. How was it before? How was it after? How are these 2 things similar and different, you see? And then when it comes to continuity and change over time, instead of being in the middle and looking at them like this, I'm over here at the beginning and I'm like, how was it here? Okay, it was that way here. And then how is it here? Okay, well, how are these two the same and different? And so basically for 3 of those 4, you're just saying like, okay, this is how they're similar. This is how they're different. And, you know, so every turning point is an incomplete turning point. That if anything they put in an LEQ for periodization, it's a turning point in a way, but in a way it wasn't. Don't need equal time. You don't need equal time. That like you can emphasize change. And then if there's one sentence in the body paragraphs that expresses continuity, guess what? You got that first thinking skill point. So that's the thing. The better you know what's expected of you, because you don't have time to be looking at that stuff trying to figure it out. Got me? And so if you just, you know, want to look at those rubrics tomorrow, you know, on your way to the exam, all that kind of stuff, you know, go ahead and do that. But yeah, you will not be provided with rubrics. But now the LEQ, it will show you the thinking skill. Okay. So now the prompts themselves, you know, pretty much show that off. But if you're doing that, like if we're going here, so if you go to the LEQs, this shows, you see where it says historical thinking skill periodization?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now here's the thing too. Like they will both be, like odds are that both of the LEQ prompts will address the same thinking skill, and they'll be similar prompts, but they will have different topics. So that's something to keep in mind, that the LEQ top, you know, they'll be different in the subject matter, but they won't be different in their thinking skill objective. So with that, yeah, so just make sure, my best advice, know what they expect of you before you take the test. Of course, you're taking the test early tomorrow morning. So for right now, you know, go to bed, and then in the morning, you know, take a look at those, you know, actually take a quick look at the rubrics tonight, go to bed, take a look in the morning, because if you take a look at it tonight, your brain will process them while you sleep. All right? But you need to go to bed. So look at the rubrics real quick, then go to bed. Got it, Zach?
All right, I think I'll stick around, because I promise you that me not getting sleep will not be the reason that will do poorly.
What? Okay. Hey, I believe in freedom, people. Okay, so you know, you can stick around against my advice. All right, Priyanka, let's see, what you're on, what coast or what time zone?
I'm on West Coast.
Okay, West Coast. Olivia?
I'm on East Coast.
Oh, we've got another one. Olivia, how can I help you go to bed?
Okay, well, I'm not going to bed. Well, I'm just.
Wait, you're in the South. You're in the South. You're one of us. Where are you from?
I'm from South Carolina.
Really? You must be low country.
No, I'm from Aiken, South Carolina.
Okay, Aiken. Okay, so that's an Aiken kind of accent. Okay, gotcha. I'm in Clemson. So wait, are you like, who's your? Let's see. There's one guy I know, Dustin.
Mr. Fowler.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had him my freshman year.
You did? Okay. Say hey to Mr. Fowler. Will you tell him hello for me?
Of course I will. He loves you.
Okay, yes, Dustin Fowler. Okay, you're Dustin Fowler school. Okay, yeah. Olivia, not getting any sleep is not an option. Okay, so how can I help you?
Okay, well, so my question right now is, you know how the Republican and Democratic parties, like, they basically switched, like, at some point, like, they're basically, like, they're
okay,
what they stood for. I don't know. And no. It was the North supported one, and then the South supported the other, but then it, like, switched.
If you don't get some sleep, Olivia, you're gonna
sorry, I just know. I just remember.
Okay, what I'm getting here, Olivia, your brain is already fried from all this cramming.
I know. I sound like a. I don't even know.
I know, but I'm giving you the thing is. I'm giving you good advice. You need to go to bed. Now, I'm going to try to answer your question as far as I understand it. Okay, but you very, very obviously need to go to bed. Do you understand?
I think he's talking about in terms of voting.
Right. So the thing is, okay, let me give you a quick little survey. And Olivia, if I explain this to you, will you please go to bed when I'm finished?
No promises. I'm sorry.
Well, anyway, all right. Now that's where, see, I'm here past when I told y'all I'd be here. So that's when I say, like, oh, well, you know what? If Olivia doesn't go to bed, then I just stop. All right. That's a two can play that. Oh,
It's just
all right.
extreme.
That ain't
it's just
right.
extreme dedication.
Yes, thank you.
Wait, are y'all saying just like take uppers in the morning or? Oh gosh. Okay.
DBQ on 1 hour sleep.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So the Solid South, FDR was a politician. FDR basically understood. Now, if we go back to like the 1920s, now remember the phenomenon of the Southern South that started in Reconstruction, okay? So what we look at here is Herbert Hoover. It's like basically like, look at that. I mean, it's just like basically the whole country. Now, the Democratic nominee was a Catholic, which I think scared some Southerners off. Plus, the economy was good, so the Republicans, but the Catholic states of Massachusetts and Rhode Island voted Democratic. But the thing is, here is a picture of the Solid South, okay? 1924 presidential election. The country feels one way. Wisconsin feels another way. And the former Confederate States of America feels another way. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's like you can't like pull the South away from the Democratic Party. I mean, it's just not happening. The Solid South, they remember, those white Southern voters remember Reconstruction. Okay, those white Southern voters remember Reconstruction. So what happens here is they're pretty reliable voters. Now, when FDR gets into office, the New Deal coalition combines, union members, immigrants, cities, African Americans, and white Southerners. Now, FDR never forgets where his white Southern bread is buttered. And so he never advocates, while he does during the New Deal, he does have things in there like there are black CCC camps, okay? He's got things in there so that, so that African Americans get relief, but he is not challenging Jim Crow. He is not going to advocate for civil rights legislation because that's going to alienate these people. And so FDR, every time he runs, he can count on the support, where you see here where the Republicans are actually making some gains. And so part of the reason why FDR can stay in office is he continues to get these votes from the Solid South. So FDR never forgets where that bread is buttered, so once again, the Solid South. Now, Harry Truman's a guy that's just more of like, you know what, if it's the right thing to do, I'm going to do it. So in 1948 election year, Harry Truman said, you know what, I'm going to issue an executive order requiring for the military to be integrated, for, to get rid of segregation in the military. The South's like, I know you didn't. And so then, you see that South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, and one voter from Tennessee, they are, they're all, they're voting for Strom Thurmond, the so-called Dixiecrats, okay? So this represents the first rebellion of the conservative, like white South against the Democratic Party. So in 1952, now Eisenhower was a Republican, but he was Ike. I like Ike. Like Eisenhower's campaigns were candidate-centered rather than party-centered. So you see here where a popular candidate like Eisenhower actually is getting some support from the South. And so then in 1956, we see that, once again, the Democrats, the only, like basically Adlai Stevenson is only getting votes in former slave states. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He wins 6 former slave states. So then we've got 1960 with JFK. And JFK, of course, is a Catholic. There are some people that aren't going to vote. You've got some stuff going on there. All right. And so, basically you've got, the South is a little bit confused and divided, some of it going for Nixon, which, in 1964, the Democrats put up LBJ. Now, notice here, this is where The only states to vote for Barry Goldwater were his home state of Arizona. And then notice here the Deep South. All 5 of these states were original members, like original members of the Confederate States of America. I mean, Deep South. And so, you know, basically what we see here is Barry Goldwater. He wasn't like pro-segregation, but what he said was that the federal government should not regulate the states so much. And so, you know, he was proposing a more limited federal government. And so some, you know, people start to switch parties. You know, so this is where you start to see the conservative movement. Now, Goldwater's trounced, but then in 1980, who's going to get elected?
Reagan.
Reagan, very good. 1980, Reagan will get elected on a very similar platform. Now, the difference is that the evangelicals have been, have been organized into the moral majority. Now, the Democrats in 1968 nominate Hubert Humphrey, who is, a Minnesota, liberal. And so what happens here is that rather than vote Democrat and rather than vote for Nixon, once again, now there's George Wallace. Now, he's the guy on Forrest Gump. Y'all seen Forrest Gump?
Yeah, he gets shot.
And he's the guy that stands in front of the university and like, hey, you dropped your book, sort of thing. So anyway, what we've got here, okay, George Wallace gets these votes. Now, notice South Carolina voted for Goldwater and voted for Nixon. So what you're starting to see is some of these southern states are starting to vote. And now Nixon then launches what's called his Southern strategy. So Nixon launches the Southern strategy, which is basically let me appeal to these Southern conservatives. And so you see here, 49 state victory. All right. So basically, Nixon has done something that no Republican has ever done. He has gotten the votes of every Southern state. Okay, now he got the votes of just about every other state as well. But as far as that, now the Democrats, again, they nominate George McGovern. George McGovern was a liberal Democrat. Now, what the Democrats do, though, in 1976, how did the Democrats reach back out to the South?
With the Southerner.
With a Southerner by nominating Jimmy Carter, which Jimmy Carter is not like, even now, Jimmy Carter is pro-life. You know, it's like Jimmy Carter is like really a very like centrist Democrat. Like nobody would really refer to Jimmy Carter as like a hard, like liberal Democrat. And notice here that Jimmy Carter, wins. It's a close election. But one of the things here is the only Southern state that Ford carries is Virginia. And so, basically that's what you see there is that the South is now voting for the Democrats again because, they've nominated a Southerner. Now, of course, then the Republicans nominate Reagan. And aside from Carter's home state of Georgia, because the economy sucks. And, when the economy sucks, although it may not be the president's fault politically, that's what they do. And so as far as that goes, you see that election, now Reagan is going to follow that up because then the Democrats nominate another, hard liberal, Walter Mondale. These Minnesota candidates don't do too well. Do y'all notice that? You had Hubert Humphrey, then you got Mondale. And so Reagan, 49 state victory. And so then you've got George H.W. Bush in 1988. Of course, that was a very interesting campaign. But, basically, he's got so Reagan and Bush got all the southern states. Now, what are the Democrats going to do again?
Bill Clinton from Arkansas.
Nominate a Southerner. Now, Bill Clinton comes from this like centrist Democrat, centrist wing of the Democratic Party, that I am a Southern governor. I am not somebody who's a hard liberal. I talk like you. I sound like you. Now, notice the Republicans still, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The Republicans carry the majority of the former Confederacy. 3, let's see. So 7 out of 11 former Confederate states. Then in 1996, you've got, basically Clinton carries 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically the South, though, what you notice here is ever since Reagan, the majority of the South has voted how?
Republican.
Voted Republican. And so what we see here in the post-Bill Clinton era, you see that George W. Bush, basically wins, of course, a little questionable in Florida there in 2000. Gosh, that's a young Al Gore, huh? And then, of course, then the Democrats are like, oh, let's nominate a really rich guy from Massachusetts that's horribly out of touch. And so, but you see here where Bush carries all of the South here. Now, President Obama, you see where, gosh, what an awful person to run for president, John McCain. Just as far as a candidate, it's like this guy versus this guy. Y'all see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, what were you thinking, Republicans? And so basically you see here now President Obama carried, now of course changing demographics in Florida and North Carolina and Virginia. So President Obama got Florida and Virginia both times, but the Republicans have stayed strong in the South. Okay. So, but President Obama won his elections with that. Now, of course, in 2016, we see that President Trump has gotten like all of the South except for Virginia. So, the Republicans won again in Florida. So as far as that is concerned, that's what you're basically looking at. So I hope that was helpful, Olivia.
It was.
Okay. And I hope that might have been helpful enough to persuade you. Now I've gotten almost everybody. I've gotten everybody but 12, like in bed, hopefully. Okay. Cause, so as far as that goes, Olivia, you need to relax. You need to let your brain sleep, because if you don't rest your brain's not going to process and internalize the stuff that you've studied tonight. And it's going to just slip out.
I know, but I'm a night owl.
I'm a night owl too. Obviously, the difference is I don't have to take an exam in the morning and I don't have to go to work tomorrow. So, bam. Okay, that's what I did. Yeah, I took the day off tomorrow, but then I've got to drive to Virginia Beach. So, that's that. But Olivia, watch the hip hues, exam meditation, let yourself go to sleep.
Okay.
Okay. And let me know how it goes. Tell Mr. Fowler hello for me, okay? I want to meet that
I will,
guy
and thanks for
sometime.
following me on Instagram.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, that was really clever, getting your Finsta to comment, and then you're like, oh, I agree with her. And I'm same person.
I just didn't think you were going to notice.
Yeah, I was like, this is the same person, because I clicked on it. I was like, oh, this is the exact same person. That's hilarious. All right, but anyway, all right. So Olivia, have a good night. Get a little rest.
Too.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Up in the morning. All right. See ya. Okay. So what else do we have here? What time zone, Bailey?
Central.
Central. Okay, Bailey, we need to talk you into going to bed. See, you look tired. What could I do to get you to go to bed?
Basically, I just need some clarification on the differences between the civil rights organizations.
Okay, you mean like during the 1960s?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got and I think I've got that in the period, 8 notes, but like Martin Luther King, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, okay, which Martin Luther King was a Baptist preacher. This is something that is, really part of the whole, religious thing. Now, of course, as a preacher, Martin Luther King is endorsing nonviolence. So, that's his movement, civil disobedience and nonviolence. Now, Malcolm X, and which Malcolm X was affiliated with the Nation of Islam, sometimes called on test the Black Muslims, but the Nation of Islam, which basically preached Black nationalism and also Black superiority, like the white man's the devil and all that kind of stuff. Now, so basically, while Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, they're working for integration. Malcolm X is preaching black nationalism, that we don't want to integrate with the white community. In fact, we'd rather have our own stores, our own restaurants. Like Malcolm X would eat at, like basically, black Muslim owned restaurants. He always sat at a seat facing the door. He always, of course somebody did kill him, but he was understandably paranoid that every time he sat at the restaurant, he always had a seat where he could see the door. And so nobody's ever going to come up on it. Y'all ever seen that picture of Malcolm X looking out the window, and he's got that like automatic, he's got that high powered rifle, and he's just like looking out the window. It's a great shot. But Malcolm X is basically saying, now, of course, people are like, oh, Malcolm X advocated violence. Well, the thing is, Malcolm X said that, look, that if somebody is using violence against me, I will use violence to defend myself. And so that's really what's going on there, is that it's like, look, I will use violence for self-defense, which if you think about it, Thomas Jefferson used, oh gosh, that's funny. Justin says here that if you get 100 on the multiple choice and SAQs and a 4 out of 7 on the DBQ, you can get a 5 without the long essay. Good luck with that. Okay. But the thing is that, basically, Malcolm X is continuing this like black nationalist tradition from Marcus, that started with Marcus Garvey. And so, that's going on there. Now, as far as, going into that, let me think here. Now, then you have the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. SNCC, SNCC. Now, what this has got, as far as that goes, this has got like young people who are working along with the nonviolent civil rights movement. Now, of course, they're young. What do we know about young people? Are young people patient people?
No.
And what's happening is like Martin Luther King's strategy, has like really a, it's got, Martin Luther King's strategy, it requires patience. It's in some ways, if you think about Booker T. Washington's strategy, it requires a bit of patience. And so, these young people, they're not seeing the kind of results that they would like to see. And so there are a lot of young people that grow disillusioned with the nonviolent movement. And so Malcolm X, even though, Malcolm X is shot in 1964, there are people who start to gravitate toward his more militant philosophy. That we need, so toward Malcolm X's more militant philosophy. And that's where you've got things like the, the Black Panthers, like Stokely Carmichael. Have you heard of Stokely Carmichael?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so Stokely Carmichael's an example of somebody who started off in like SNCC, in that nonviolent movement. And, then from there, got into the more radicalized, like, Black Panther, type of movement, where he's basically saying, what, we've really had enough of, all of this, all of this stuff. And we're ready to be violent if we have to. Black Panthers would sometimes, they would walk around with a shotgun, which is really interesting because today gun control is like a more liberal thing, but gun control was introduced in California by Ronald Reagan because white conservatives in California, they didn't like these black men walking around with shotguns. And so, gun control was like, in the 60s, that was a conservative thing. So, as far as that goes, that's really what you're seeing, like further radicalization. And so both of these movements, I would say, I think a lot of times, people put so much emphasis on Martin Luther King and the nonviolent movement that they really don't give enough of a, of credit to like Malcolm X, like in 1964, when Malcolm X said, look, the ballot or the bullet. If we don't get what we want this time, we're not going to be singing "We Shall Overcome." We're going to march on Washington. We're not going to leave. And, that scared people. So I think like having like the good cop, bad cop thing, I think that kind of worked out well for the civil rights movement. Now, of course, if it had been all Malcolm X, like violent stuff, that would have been put down just as violently. So I think that it's important to appreciate, both sides of that. Now, Bailey, where do you live, Bailey?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. Okay, so you're in Central Time. But the thing is, Bailey, I see you already nodding off. I want you to embrace that, okay? Set your alarm for early if you want. You are clearly tired, and you need to quit looking at screens. You need to turn the lights out, and you need to relax and let yourself go to sleep, okay?
Okay.
I'm gonna take that advice.
Yes, okay, good deal, good deal. Was that Zach?
Yeah, thank you so much for tonight.
Okay, yes, Zach, take the advice. Go, run with it. All right, Bailey.
I know. I realized I was tired because when you were talking about the presidents, it took me a good 5 minutes to realize that we were talking about presidents.
Yes, and the thing is, if you don't get some sleep, then everything you've been doing is going to be for nothing in the morning, okay? Yes, your body. Okay, good. Yes, everybody, give her a hand. Okay. All right, Bailey, thank you so much. Keep that notebook closed. Relax your mind. Go to sleep.
Thank you.
All right, good night, Bailey.
Good night.
All right. Okay, we've only got a handful of people left. Okay, so Brianna. Okay, we don't hear Brianna. Okay. Let's see. Izzy. West Coast?
Yeah, I can wait. It's fine. If someone
Okay, what do we have? Kelly?
I mean, it's lunchtime here, so I can wait as long as
Okay, all right, gotcha. Yeah, we got that's daylight. That's not a lamp. Okay.
daylight.
And Priyanka, where are you again?
I'm in California.
Okay, so I've got people that
Oh,
okay.
California.
Now the thing is, I need to go to bed in a little bit, but at least I don't have to pressure people to go to bed. Okay, so as far as that goes, is what do you have for me? Now here's the thing though that I want to tell y'all, that y'all actually have an opportunity, unlike these people who just who just left. Y'all actually have an opportunity to get a good night's sleep. And Izzy, you have the look of someone who's been studied. You have the look of someone who's it is 9:30 and it's really time for you to kind of wind it down. Okay. Now, so Izzy, what can I do to give you peace of mind and get you to stop all this studying and go to bed?
Wait, can you ask? Wait, I lost all my notes for this.
Okay, you organize your notes,
Okay.
Priyanka. How can I help you? Priyanka, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Is it my turn?
Yes. How can I help you?
Can we go over like why and why not it was like the era of good feelings for under Monroe?
Okay, the era of good feelings okay. So as far as that goes, the era of good feelings under James Monroe. Okay, so as far as that that goes, this is the time between the first and the second party system. Okay, so the first party system has fallen, the second party system has yet to happen. And so as far as that goes with Monroe, what you're seeing there is basically this era of good feeling is where there is not party competition. And so that's where, what do you call it? Yeah, that's why he basically gets elected almost unanimously, because the Federalist Party has ceased to compete as a national entity. Now, here's another thing, that James Monroe, when he gets elected the first time, now in 1816, he got elected over a Federalist. And what happened here, and this is what I love about this era of politics, is that as far as that goes, okay, so let's see. So election of 1816, okay? So as far as that goes, so James Monroe defeats the Federalist candidate. Now, James Monroe wins every state except for Massachusetts, which, remember, that was before the Missouri Compromise. Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Delaware. Now, what James Monroe does when he's first elected, now, when President Trump was elected, he went to states that had given him the win. But James Monroe decided that the first thing he'd do was he'd go on a goodwill tour of New England. James Monroe decided, I'm going to go first to the states that didn't vote for me to show that I can be a president for all Americans, you know? And so basically people appreciated that James Monroe was like, look, I'm not going to be a factional president. And so when James Monroe ran again, he didn't have any serious opposition. And so he basically, now there was one guy from New Hampshire that decided to vote for John Quincy Adams. Now there's an urban legend that like he voted for John Quincy Adams so that, you know, James Monroe wasn't unanimous like Washington, but there's no legitimacy to that. He basically just didn't like James Monroe. And so the thing is, it's just the first party system had collapsed after the War of 1812. The second party system had yet to take shape.
Okay.
Yeah. And Priyanka, you look like you've been studying a lot. You got the look of somebody who's been studying.
Yeah.
Okay, your eyes are a little bit glazed, you know, just even though you are on the West Coast, it is okay to go to bed at like to stop studying at 9:40. Now I've been really having to pressure some of those people on the East Coast, but I'm really telling you, like, now, is there anything else I could answer for you?
No, I think you pretty much covered it all.
Well, if you think that, Priyanka, then get some rest, you see?
Okay.
And actually get a good night's sleep and just go kill it tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yes. All right, Priyanka, have a wonderful night. Okay.
Thank you.
And let's see. Brianna, you're on the East Coast.
I'm a Central.
Central, but still, you need to go to bed. How can I help you?
I know. I was having computer issues, so it just took me a while. Okay. I need help with the Iran-Contra affair and supply side economics.
Okay. Supply side economics is basically where you are, that's Reagan, right? Like Reaganomics, supply side, that essentially we need to make sure that, you know, like basically the rich don't need to be weighed down with taxes because that's going to interfere with the economy. All right. So if we weigh the rich down with taxes, we're going to basically weigh down the economy. So supply side economics is we need to make sure that corporate taxes on the wealthy are not too high, because if they are too high, then the job creators are not going to have the money to put into the economy. All right.
Okay.
So Reaganomics is about like low taxes and especially like, you know, this kind of trickle down thing. Now, the Iran-Contra thing, basically that this is part of Reagan's rollback plan when it comes to communism. And so especially in Latin America, that a communist like leftist regime has taken over in Nicaragua. And so Ronald Reagan's administration is like, we can't let that happen. Now, Congress did not authorize Reagan to fund the Contras. Now, the Contras were anti-communist guerrillas that we were helping, but Congress did not let Reagan fund them. So the Reagan administration decided we're going to sell arms to Iran, and we're going to take that money that we get from illegally selling arms to Iran, and we're going to give it to the Contras off the books. Now, that was discovered, and that became a scandal of the Reagan administration.
Okay.
All right. So, Brianna, time for you. It's almost midnight. Okay. The better night's sleep you have, the better you feel, the quicker stuff comes to you in the morning. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And thank you, Brianna. And you go to bed. Let me know how it goes tomorrow. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good one. All right. So we're down to 11 people in here. And Izzy, how can I help you?
Okay. So I get like really confused between like the different depressions. I know there were a couple, but like I just like, especially, I don't know, period 7, like between 1890 and
okay, here's something like and this is something let me go ahead and tell you. Period numbers will never be mentioned on the exam.
Oh, I'm just looking at notes. For you.
Oh, okay, but yeah,
I'm not gonna remember.
Yeah, it's like I hate period culture, but I do want people to know it's like it's never gonna say like period 7 will never appear on an exam. So I don't even really know the periods.
Okay.
And the thing is, I want you to talk to me in terms of like take the period numbers out now that you're about to take the test. What do you want to know?
Okay, so how was like the Great Depression like a turning point in American history?
Well, the Great Depression was a turning point in American history because for the first time, the American government had given, like the federal government had given direct relief. That's really the big turning point of the New Deal, is the direct relief. Okay, so the direct relief is a big deal for that, because remember, Hoover was trying to tweak things. It's just Hoover did the wrong things, and Hoover wasn't willing to, to give direct relief. Government had never done that before. So the thing is, nobody ever disputes that. And now Republicans today may want less of a role for the federal government, that kind of stuff. But the idea of the government giving direct relief to people who need help, not that controversial today. And so before that, so that's a turning point. Also there's, a lot more government regulation. A lot of these government regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FDIC. So while FDR may not have been incredibly successful in getting the economy going again, he did create a lot of agencies that make a big impact even today. So the FDIC, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, all that kind of stuff. And so all of that. So, okay, guys. Okay, so sounds good. Olivia is on her way out. All right. So, that's that. I would say those are the turning points there, as far as just, that the government is providing that direct relief, and that there are a lot more federal agencies, and the government is doing things that people wouldn't have ever thought of. The government, another thing is public utilities. The Tennessee Valley Authority was very groundbreaking in the sense that the federal government had not provided it was seen as utilities were a function of the private sector, you see? And so that's what's happening there.
Okay.
All right. And let's see what we've got from Kelly. What you got for me, Kelly? Because I'm about to,
Hi. I was just going to ask about the Treaty of Paris in 1973.
And what?
The Treaty of Paris?
Oh, you're talking about the end of the Vietnam War?
Yes, the Vietnam War.
I didn't even know what that was called, but it's another Treaty of Paris. I'll believe you. Okay. That is okay. I'm just going to kind of wing this. All right. And let me just tell y'all that I'm going to be signing off before 1 o'clock in the morning here. Okay. So I think we're winding down. We got 10 people left. I'm glad people are going to bed. And so as far as that goes, the treaty, as far as Nixon talked about peace with honor, that basically that the United States wants to, the United States wants to get out of Vietnam, but we want to do it in a way that the South Vietnamese will be able to preserve their country and all that. But basically, within 2 years of the United States getting out, North Vietnamese move in. But I've never considered the term. I mean, I've been teaching APUS history for 9 years now, and I've never discussed the terms of the treaty. Now, what is more important is the War Powers Act. Okay. What I would be focusing on there is the War Powers Act, and how Congress then basically got its, Congress got its revenge on the presidency. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution before the war, Congress is like, blank check, do whatever you want. After the war, then you have the War Powers Act, which says, okay, the president has to inform Congress within 2 days. And then the president has to, within 60 days, he's got to get congressional authorization. You see what I'm saying? So,
yes.
So that would be much more likely to show up. Now, Kelly, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Yeah. Do you think those missiles are real, or are they fake? Like what?
The North Korean missiles?
Yeah.
I mean, no one in South Korea actually cares about the war that's going on. We literally don't care about what's happening because it's been happening for the past 60 years. And
okay, so Kim Jong, people in South Korea are not scared of Kim Jong-un.
Totally. We're super chill about it. It's just okay, so if the war happens, it happens.
Okay, because I don't understand. Oh, okay, so basically y'all, because I know all of the young Koreans do military service. So y'all are if they want to attack, come. You're if they want to attack, come get us, huh?
Right. We're bring it.
Bring it. Okay. All right. Because I'm
actually,
just I don't understand.
Mr. Richey, could I just quickly say something?
Yeah.
My friend just Snapchatted me and said the AP Euro t-shirt you're wearing is the one her class sent to you.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
actually
wait,
from
you've got.
Florida, so I'm actually from Florida, so she goes to Childs High School, I think, and
Yes, Charles. This is Charles High School AP Euro. You went to like.
yeah, she just Snapchatted me and said she sent that to you.
So you went to Charles?
No, I actually went to Florida High.
Okay. Who's your friend?
Her name's Julia Jin.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so as far as that goes, yeah, but this is definitely yes, this is Child's High School. That's great. But yes, that's definitely you've got the right school. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, I was wondering, yeah, because I feel like President Trump's making too big of a deal out of like Kim Jong-un.
Yeah,
Huh?
I mean, if you leave him alone, then he'll probably just do nothing.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I was just curious about that. So how can I any other questions I can answer for you for APUSH?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, excellent. Now, let's see. How are you doing, Izzy? I think you self-muted.
Oh, I'm doing. I think it's just a slight.
Okay, good. Okay,
Like,
gotcha.
I didn't go to school. Like I slept in, so I knew I would get like a good boost tomorrow.
Okay. But the thing is,
But I'm not gonna
especially
stay up.
okay, Izzy, especially if you slept in, you need to go ahead and give your brain a break because your brain doesn't want to slow down because you got up late today. Okay. So I feel like so you didn't go to school. You've been basically studying all day.
I went to college fair.
Okay, you went to college fair.
And then at like midday, I went home and then took a break, and then at like 3.
Okay.
Wait, are you taking the exam tomorrow too?
Yeah.
Wow. So everyone in America just takes it on the 7th.
Yes, it's basically everybody on the same day, and so yeah, it just kind of rolls out. Yeah, so everybody takes it the same day, and which I don't see how that, because it's just to me, it just feels like I mean, there's so much staggering. I don't know. It's just it's kind of weird how they do it because you don't start all at the same time. So it's strange, but yeah. So the thing is, and she has to take it at 8 a.m. Which I guess the same time you've got to take it. But yeah, so the thing is, I would say, Kelly, do whatever feels good for you because it's the middle of the day. But remember, Kelly, wind down at a certain point.
Yes,
okay, wind down. And so Izzy, I would recommend go ahead and wind down unless y'all got a quick question for me. Okay, because I'm about to go.
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richey. Will you be doing, actually no, since most of America is taking the exam tomorrow, I guess you won't be doing any other reviews.
No, but yeah, very, yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty much done because tomorrow I'll be driving to resting my voice and driving to Virginia Beach because I'm doing like an all day like live review in Virginia Beach for AP Euro on Saturday. So, like in an auditorium type thing. So yeah, I'm going to kind of take it easy tomorrow and all of that kind of stuff. If there's now tomorrow, what time is it over there right now, Kelly?
Right now it's 1:52 p.m.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, but I don't have any other like events coming up or anything like that. Now, as far as let's see, 152, so
it's 13 hours.
Okay, so yeah, we've got 13 hours difference. Okay, gotcha. And so yeah, we could I think I'm gonna go ahead and hang up my APUSH hat. But I think you're gonna be I'm gonna go ahead and kind of reorient, and now I can just be totally AP Euro. But yes, this child shirt, tell your friend like, yes, I'm a big fan of this shirt. And I was like, I'm just gonna wear it tonight to be ironic, just for fun. So anyway, yeah, thank y'all so much. And for the people who are watching, we've still got 11
Thank you
viewers.
so much.
Oh, hey, thank you. Yeah. Now let me ask y'all, did y'all find this, was it about the right, did it feel like there were too many people or were there about the right amount of people?
I think
there was the right amount.
I thought there was too many people.
Okay, now Isabel, what I would ask you then, how much would you have been willing to pay for a smaller amount of people?
25.
Okay, so the thing is, if I had if it were like 25 people for $20 each.
I would totally just go for that one instead of the 50 for 10.
Yeah, because you would get your answers
Okay,
like,
you know,
quickly.
I might try, see, because this is the first time I did something like this. So what I might do is like, I may try something like 35 or 4, like maybe like 30 for 15 or something like that. You know, I may do something
that's
like
good.
that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
so you
sounds
feel
much
like
better.
if I were to increase the price slightly, but there would be less people in there, y'all would be totally like, y'all would like that.
I
would
think
be
30,
okay with
like,
that.
yeah. I think
Okay.
30 is like a minimum.
Because the
like
comment
30
section
to
is
40. Yeah.
pandemonium.
Okay. Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
now it was a lot better. Now it was a lot better than, you know, like the 2,000, you know, whatever, 4,000
The
people or
tweet,
however
yeah.
many were in
Oh,
it. You know,
yeah.
it's like it was crazy amount of people in there. And so there were so many questions we didn't get to. But as far as, okay, so if I were, so maybe 30 people or something like that would be a better
Mhm.
kind of, okay. So as far as that goes, you know, let's say divided by 50. Okay. So yeah, so what I'm going to try maybe a small, so y'all would say slightly higher price for a smaller number of people, that would be worth it.
I think that would
Yeah.
be
Okay.
way better.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will keep experimenting because I'm just kind of doing some things, you know, trying to see what works and all of that kind of stuff. Are y'all taking government next year?
Mm-hmm.
I hope to.
Okay,
I am.
so I may do, you know, because government's something, I don't teach it every year. I've taught it a couple times and I tutor in it and stuff like that, so I know what I'm doing. But I may try this format in the future, but just, you know, I'm trying to find what works. So it's like maybe 50, you know, a few too many. So I may try that like 50, you know, just 15 and see what I get on, you know, see what I get on that. Okay, well, thank y'all for the feedback. I may send y'all a little follow-up by email to get y'all to kind of rate it, because that's the thing. I'm just trying these things, just seeing how that happens. And, you know, because one of these days I'm hoping to go like full time with my channel, you know, and
That
just,
would be
you know,
awesome.
well, because
honestly.
see what I mean, I teach school full time, you know, on top of everything else. So it's a lot of stuff to have going on. So, you know, I'm just trying to figure out ways to like, okay, you know, you do things, you bring people in, you get, you know, more of a, you know, but I think it worked overall. But yeah, I think I would probably like to see like maybe a few less in there. Or what if I had like 2 levels to where there are people that can cut, like what if I were to say that there are going to be people who can come in and see it in the chat, but then there are going to be people who will have access to the video and they pay a little bit more to be like in the front of the line.
I mean, if that's possible, that would be really good. Because
Okay, because that may be another option.
So you can like have people just viewing, and then instead of like, because like sometimes even if like you don't get your answer, like your questions answered, like you still get like good content.
Okay, so you know what I might do with that is, so if I had something to where it was like $20 or $15 to be like in the group that gets to like chat with me and, you know, go in the chat room, but then have another thing where it's like $5 or something to just view it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel
Then
like
that
a lot
way
of people will
we
do
can
that.
get more people in there, but then the people who really want to have their questions answered get their questions answered.
Right.
Okay, you know, I may go, so that way it would be like a fireside chat with other people. You know, it's like a chat with like 20 or 30 people with like 50 or 100 people watching the chat, but they're just okay. Well, in that case, you know what? That's you know, that's something I might consider then. Well, thank y'all. But now, do y'all have well, of course, don't use the app, but do you have the app yet, Kelly?
No, sir, I didn't get the app.
What kind of phone do you have?
I have iOS, an iPhone.
Yeah, iOS. Okay. Y'all, you know, let's see. Kelly, shoot me an email real quick. Izzy, do you have the app?
I got it for free. Yeah.
Oh, so you got.
I got this promo because I had you on Twitter notifications like yesterday, and like I kept trying it all the time, and then like once you posted it, like someone would have already redeemed it, but then I got it like this
Okay, so you did the notifications. Okay, so you've got Kelly. Yeah, email me now, and I will send you a promo code, because that way, you know, you can just kind of see, you know, what you're getting wrong, what you're getting right. And Izzy, have you given it Izzy, you won't be able to. Yeah, y'all won't be able to review it because y'all are getting it for free, so they won't let you review it.
I have just emailed you. Oh my God, thank you so much, Mr. Richey.
Yeah,
awesome.
now I'm gonna make some improvements on the app, but it's just like, it's a little bit frustrating, like seeing that like they don't really like people just don't quite like understand like what the you know what the intent was. That you know it's just like look, it's just a little app. You know that's all it is. All right.
Well, because I got it for free, it won't let me.
Yeah, it won't. Yeah, if you did that, yeah, it won't let y'all review it. So you know, but y'all just you know, hopefully it's helpful to you and all that kind of stuff. And remember, there is also one for AP Gov. So there's one for I'm here for you for AP Gov next year. So keep that in mind. All right.
No.
Mr. Richey, sorry. I sent you an email, and I was wondering how I would use the promo code, because I know that to download apps on App Store, like you have to use your fingerprint or whatever. But how would I go about redeeming?
You have to go to the bottom, and it says redeem.
Oh,
Google
okay.
it. I always tell people. I always
Thank you so
say, "Hey, I'm giving you a free promo code. Google it." All right. So that's always my yeah. But you know what? To be honest, anytime I've used a promo code, I have to Google it every time I do it because it's not like really easy to see. So anyway, yeah. Thank y'all very much, and let me know how those exams go tomorrow.
All right. Thank you so much.
Signing off. This has
Any
been a
more
great
feedback
Fireside
on your?
Chat. All right. Always a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.